Well, hello, Internet. Hello. I thought I'd grab this opportunity to actually just talk a little bit about Airecon, where we were over the weekend just gone. So I'm somewhat dating this. This is we're live now at the end of at mid March 2022. Hey, Heggers. Hey, Eddie. Hey, Difter. How y'all doing? Thanks for stopping by the chat. Brian's here as well. Hi, Brian. Thanks for stopping by. So, what I wanted to do was to just run sort of through what we played at Airecon and talk about that kind of stuff and things as well. And also, I got an email actually because while we were at Airecon, of course, we got our panic on and we got our UKG sorted out. And UKG is a big games expo here in the UK, probably our biggest one every year, I suppose. Um, and yeah, I mean, to be fair, yeah, Airecon is an interesting one. It's very much like a sort of the gaming one. You know, there are shops there, there are some retailers there, not a great many, but there are some. But it's primarily focused on playing, and pretty much all the halls are just set aside for gaming tables. But UKG is coming up in June. That's the big one here in the UK. We go there every year, and actually, I applied for press passes as I usually do. That one for me is much busier. So Airecon is the one where I can kind of relax and just play games, and I've got some friends that I meet up with there every year, and we just sit and we just play games and we just really focus on that. And this year in particular, we just got down to business and just played a bunch of games. But UKG is usually a lot more business. Last year, at least, when we went in 2021, I spent 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. every day just demoing games and talking to business contacts and playing new games. And so, I got a few games in the evening. We were able to meet up with some patrons as well to play, and Heggers was there, and that was really cool. So I'll try and do that again this year. I think I'll pick one night, and we'll work that out on the Patreon, guys. We'll work out a Patreon plays night, and we can all pick a game together or something. And Heggers tanked our game of Ankh. It was great. It was great. We had a great time. And yeah, so I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I'd really like to do that again. But I applied for the press passes as I usually do, and then a chap called James reached out to me, and he said, we're doing our big live stream launch of the convention. We partner with On Tabletop, who are board game media folks, and you might know them. They used to be called Beast. Oh no, I'm outing myself because it's live. Beast something. But now they're called On Tabletop, and they do a lot of coverage at the UKG, and they've got a big live stream. Beasts of War. Thanks, Eddie. Eddie knows them. Beasts of War. Back when they sort of covered more like sort of miniatures games and stuff like that, and they branched out into board games, and they cover the UKG. So anyway, they're doing a live stream. And I've got here their page. So they're going live tomorrow at noon British time. So that'll be in Britain at noon tomorrow. We're currently on, I think we've just changed times, but we might not have, and I could be losing my mind. So the best thing to do if you want to know what time that is and you're not in the UK is to punch in noon British time. But the point is, they're doing a giveaway. So they asked me to share this and say, hey, we're doing a big giveaway. So this is from the Expo site, and if you want to find this site, you can find a link in the description of this live stream, and they're going to give away some nice things here. And also that one on the bottom right, you're not going to win a bedroom. In fact, what you are going to win are tickets to the Expo, plus a hotel room at the Expo. And if you know anything about the UKG, it takes place at the Birmingham NEC, which is the National Expo Centre, and it's a giant nightmare area because it's like its own little town where it's just the expo center, a train station, an airport, and hotels, and that's it. So it's really hard to sort of get an Airbnb around there. Pretty much all the Airbnbs are like just hotel rooms, and it's quite hard to get in and out of unless you have a car, and even then it's going to be a pretty significant drive. So it's a great venue. It's huge. Our expo, the biggest board game expo in the UK, barely takes up like we take up like 3 halls, which is a fraction of the space within the expo center. It's truly massive. It's utterly unreal. Yeah, so yeah, Hager says, I'm glad it's within driving distance. Yeah, Haggers, you're very lucky in that regard, because it's an expensive con to attend because of the NEC. But so you can win that. You can win tickets and you can win a hotel room, and that's what that bottom right one is there. These other things are games. I don't know if this is the full catalog or if they're going to be adding more. But anyway, I thought I'd let you guys know, and I thought I'd mention it because James asked me to mention it, and you know, you can go watch their stream and win some games, maybe, you know. And that's something you could do tomorrow or Saturday afternoon. So that's fun and cool. And you know, I'm always supportive of people giving stuff away. You know, it's nice. Mark says, go to a Bostel. I don't know what a Bostel is. Should I know what that is? Difter says, is the UK already on daylight saving times? Looks like a no. Then I am losing my mind, Difter, which is the less reassuring outcome of the discussion. They're giving away a bunch of games, Eddie. A bunch of games. You could win World of Warcraft, I'm assuming these are pictures of what they're giving away, and not just like random games. But I knew about the hotel room, so it kind of makes sense, right? They've got a bunch of stuff from Big Potato Games, two lots of stuff from Big Potato Games, and they've got one of the Exit games, which Chris is a big fan of. I know. They've got the Adventures of Robin Hood, which I actually have a copy of, which I haven't played yet, but it looks neat. It's very, very light sort of Robin Hood adventure game, from what I understand, but I've always wanted to give it a shot. I thought it looked pretty cool. And they've clearly shot all of these nice publicity stills on their Beasts of War, like Necromunda battlefields. Yeah, then you've got the World of Warcraft Wrath of the Lich King, and I always thought Wrath of the Lich King was the coolest World of Warcraft expansion, although it did come out right about the time I stopped playing, but I like the Frozen Norths. It's pretty cool, so. There's more. They're giving away oh, that's what you're saying, Eddie. Yeah, so he's saying there's a lot more than just this here to see what they're giving away. So that's pretty cool. So lots and lots of games. So you'll find out, I suppose, if you're watching the stream, how to win those. And that could be a cool thing. And, you know, I'm happy to support them as well. They've always been quite supportive of us with the press passes and everything, so... So yeah, happy to share the news, and I thought while I was here we could have a bit more, another one of these chatting sessions. I've got an agenda this time. I've got a little agenda here. There's actually a Kickstarter commentary section, but I don't think we're going to get to it. I think we'll actually probably spend most of the time just talking about games that I played at Airecon. And then I've got some questions, a couple of questions from the patrons here as well. So that's the agenda. We're going to do Airecon stuff. Then if there's time, I'll do a brief Kickstarter commentary. It's going to be very brief, because I just saw 3 things that I kind of know about. Negus is going to do his best to derail it. But I don't know, we might skip that, depending on how late it gets. And then we've got a couple of questions from the patrons as well. So, yeah, so look, I made this. Bam! This is my Airecon agenda. My Airecon visit. So you can see what we played Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then honorable mentions are games that I brought but we didn't get to play. And interestingly, actually, usually when I go to Airecon, what happens is that it takes us forever to decide who's going to play what and how we're going to divide ourselves up. But in this case, it didn't, because one of the organizers of this sort of the games, someone who brings a lot of games and teaches them and gets people playing, unfortunately had COVID, couldn't attend, which meant that there was fewer people sort of bringing games to the table, and so it was actually somewhat easier to organize people into tables, and that was cool because I got to play a lot of the games I brought, which was nice. And I was attending. Actually, we've got some photos over here as well. If we go back to our thing over here, this is just my Instagram. I'm just borrowing this to show you guys the photos. And oh yeah, so this is an introduction. This is my my friend Fred here, and Fred is actually a board game YouTuber and game designer, and he came with Michael and I, and kind of at the last minute as well, because normally we take Ollie, and we had planned to take Ollie, and actually Chris always wants to come as well, but we couldn't get Chris organized because of his work schedule. It's just really hard for him to get that together. But Fred has his own YouTube channel called and it's called Ludo no, Homo Ludens. Let me see if I can actually bring it up in a minute. But Fred, he plays war games. That's his specialty. He's really into his war games, and he knows a lot about history. So it was great to sort of talk to him about those kinds of things, because I know almost nothing about history or war games, and so that was nice. And while I'm here, actually, I thought I should do Fred the service of mentioning that he has designed a game. This is his first one. He's designed more than one, but this is the first that's been published. He gave me this review copy, which is very sweet of him. It's called Red Flag Over Paris, and this is a war game that's designed to sort of introduce you to the general principles of wargaming without being overly complex. So, full disclosure, I know Fred. He gave me this copy of the game for free. I played it with my partner, and I think the mechanisms are interesting. This was the T-shirt I bought for our Outer Rim playthrough. But yeah, this is really interesting. So this is about basically a communist commune that was in Paris in 1871, and the French government basically went into like military conflict in Paris to get rid of this communist commune, which is nuts. I know I'm not going to talk any more about it because I don't have enough knowledge, and I'm going to embarrass myself. But it's a really nice, I think, way to sort of get to know the mechanisms of war games. It's just a head-to-head game. There's a solo mode as well, but it's a two-player game otherwise, and it's actually really fast as well. Like, a lot of war games are really, really long. Like, I made the sort of the mistake somewhat of backing the fourth edition. I say mistake somewhat because I was a little naive. I backed the fourth edition of Successors by Phalanx, and I was like, Fred, you know war games, will you take me through Successors? Because I'd heard Successors was a great war game. And a really well done, and Phalanx were kickstarting this new edition, the fourth edition, and so I backed it, and Fred was like, yes, we need 4 players exactly, and I can teach you the introduction scenario with 4 players, and it will take 4 hours. I was like, wait, and he's like, yes, that's the special introduction scenario that will take 4 hours. And I was like, oh my god, okay. So yeah, so this is, I think, a pretty cool one to sort of check out if you want to dip your toe in the waters of this stuff and you don't really know where to start. He's got another one coming out later as well about Robin Hood, which could be cool to check out as well. Triple L says, since where do you care about embarrassing myself? Do you know what? I don't care about embarrassing myself. What I care about is getting something wrong, or speaking about stuff I don't know about that's historical with indelicately, which is possibly a word I just made up. But but it's really interesting stuff, and I think I can share with you as well Fred's top tip for war games, which is that the best thing to do is find a war game where you're interested in the historical side of it and just start with that. Although, to be fair, probably don't start with like some really intense coin game like Gandhi. Maybe avoid that if possible. So, so yeah, so we took Fred, and unfortunately Michael was getting the cars. This was right at the end of the convention. You can see the lights in the eye have gone out, so it's Airecon. But no, it was cool, and so that's Fred, and then we can go back to the beginning of the con. And this was the first game we played at the con. Well, it's not technically the first game we played at the con. The first game we played at the con was June Imperium, because we arrived late on the Thursday night, and we checked into our Airbnb, and then we decided to play June Imperium because Michael and I had played it previously. He knew how to play it. Fred's a very fast learner, and so we thought this will be a good one. It's not too long. Wound up being quite long, actually. Even with three of us, it went probably about 3 hours. But we were quite sleepy. But yeah, we played it with Rise of X. I've played it a few times with Rise of X now. I've played it at 4, I played it at 3. So my story with June Imperium. Are you ready for story time? Because that's what this is. This is just chatting. So you ready for story time? My story with June Imperium is basically this, right? Like, I got it for the channel. Everyone was going hype about it, and I'd heard sort of mixed reviews, and I was interested to try it out. And I played it solo on the channel a few times, and I was kind of very like lukewarm on it. And I do think that the original version does have, the core game does have some issues. I also think that Rise of X addresses some of those issues, but I do still have some concerns about the game. Having said that, I think that the game does a marvelous, either the game is really well balanced, or it's deeply flawed and does a marvelous job of concealing it. Either way, I don't regret any of my plays of June Imperium. I've never played it and gone, that was a bummer, I regretted that, I'm selling it. So I've still got it. I've bought the expansion. And the expansion also comes with an epic game mode, which is, it introduces you start with, if you know the game at all, well, if you don't know the game, I'm not going to probably be able to summarize it super quick. Oh my god, it's still in the hotness. Hang on. Well, here we go. That's just the main game there, and somebody's peanuts. But it's a worker placement deck builder, and every turn you've got these conflict cards, and you resolve a conflict card every turn. And this is kind of like one of the two interesting mechanisms, right? Because you've got all these worker placement spaces out on the board, which are these spaces like the Great Flat here and Selective Breeding. You can see the ones on the left here are all associated with different factions of June. So you've got Emperor, Spacing Guild, Bene Gesserit, and Fremen. And then on the actual planet of June, you've got the cities with the blue dots here, and the desert with the yellow triangles, and that's where you're going to get spice, one of the resources in the game. The other resources are water, and then you need soldiers to complete in the conflict, which is this situation down here, and players are going to be able to put soldiers into their garrison, and then they have to decide whether they want to commit them to the conflict, and whoever commits the most soldiers at the end of a round will win the best prizes from the card. And the conflict is a really interesting mechanism. I think it really makes the game for me, and it makes it like way more interesting than it otherwise would be, because it's direct player interaction, and a lot of it is sort of trying to bet whether or not, or guess whether or not people are going to put in, how many soldiers they're going to put in. There's an element of hidden information, both the cards that you use to place workers into spaces can also contribute to your conflict power, and you can have secret intrigue. They're not called intrigue, are they? I think they might be called intrigue, actually. You can have secret intrigue cards that also can contribute to your power, that you can play in like a second secret reveal. So it's got all the secret hidden information, but then there's also just the brute force of putting your soldiers, which are the cubes, into the conflict. And so, and then up at the top here, you've got some green spaces, which are like powers that you can unlock. And you can unlock a worker here as well, and my immediate reaction to unlocking workers is always, ugh. But in this, it's actually proven that it's tempered somewhat by the fact that in order to place the workers, you need cards, and you need to build a good deck. So getting a worker is not just like the best move all the time. And you can, I think, even do really well without getting your worker, although I don't know if you can win. Thanks, Stifter. Yeah, I did. I streamed, I think, 2 games of this. Although people have been asking, the patrons have been asking for a game with the boys where we play Rise of Ix, so we could probably do that. I should probably try and get that organized. I mean, Michael's played it a bunch. Chris will pick it up so fast. But so in the epic version of the expansion, so the expansion comes with a little extra board and some tiles you can unlock and just a lot more cards. Tiles are like passive abilities that you can invest in. So that's pretty neat. And the game typically ends when someone gets to 10 experience points in this tracker here on the right. So when someone gets to 10 victory points, the game will end. There's very little end game scoring, so it's pretty much a race. But the expansion comes with an epic game mode where the conflicts cards, you can see this is a level 2 card, but there's a level 1 card typically. Or there might be more than one, I think there's just one level 1 card normally. But in the epic mode, you play with only the level 2 and 3 cards, and you have to get to 12 victory points to end the game. But more importantly, what the epic mode does is it puts a card into your deck called Control the Spice or something like that. But it's basically a more powerful starter card, and it gets rid of one of the lesser powerful starter cards. And what this card does is it gives you a way to trash cards in your deck. So you can see here that Selective Breeding is a worker placement space that allows you to trash cards out your deck, but it's actually quite hard to find trash in the game. And this game has a market row, which is what we can actually see along here at the bottom, and these are cards that you can buy at any given, you can buy at the end of your turn, or at the end of a round. The end of your turns in a round, there's a buy phase where you can buy these cards. And a lot of complaints around the fact that the market can be very static, depending on whether or not people are investing in cards, or people are often just kind of buying whatever's available that they can afford, and it's kind of hard to build a strategy. It's kind of hard to find consistent cards that match up. This is definitely true in the first game, and I think it's a big problem. In the solo game, because the AI doesn't buy cards, it's a nightmare, because there's no churn at all of the market. That's fixed somewhat by the app, and there's a variant in the expansion that also asks you to trash or discard some cards from the marketplace. It does somewhat fix it, but I still think even with the expansion, there's still an issue with finding cards that sort of synchronize towards a strategy. I think that you might often have to make your strategy flexible around what cards are available rather than trying to find cards that support a strategy you've decided on. Having said that, you also start with these characters here who have asymmetrical powers, and to an extent these powers also give you some indication about what you should be doing. So you're not always going to be freely able to determine. I mean, you can decide upon any strategy you want, but quite frankly, I don't think there's all that many strategies, because there's only 3 ways to get points in the game, and you kind of have to do a bit of all of them. So, really the strategies are kind of build a really good deck, or really focus on upgrades that can be found elsewhere. In the original game, that would be a seat up here on the High Council. It would be the Sword Master upgrade as well for your extra worker. And in the expansion, there are these passive technologies as well. There's an extra board with passive technologies you can buy. But there is a real lack of sort of autonomy around your strategy, I think. Having said that, again, and that's kind of where I come back to this sort of the marvelous trick around the game, because there's only 3 places to get victory points, either by increasing your influence with each faction. So every time you take one of these worker placement spaces here, your little cube rides up the track, and when it passes the golden planet, you get a point. When it passes into here, you get to take this alliance thing, which is worth a point. And, you can kind of vie for that as well if someone overtakes you. But it's quite tricky to take that away from someone. But it can be done. And then the other points are going to come from here on the Siege of Airecon card. You can see there's a point. On the conflict cards, there's points. There's also a card you can buy. I don't know if this person has it visible in their photo. I'm really just... Okay, there's not. But there are 3 stock cards in the market you can buy in addition to these 5 randomized cards. And one of those stock cards is a Spice card. It's very expensive. It's not very good in your deck. All it does really is give you a point when you buy it. So it's a good purchase at the end of the game. But it's very expensive, and it's very hard to get that much buying power without sort of building a strategy around accruing buying power. And that can often leave you with less cards that are less viable for placing into worker placement spaces. But the main other sort of source of endgame points really are from the intrigue cards themselves, which come in three types. There are intrigue cards that help you do the conflict, there are intrigue cards that just kind of let you do something neat on your turn, and there are intrigue cards that give you endgame scoring conditions that are asymmetrical. Um, but building a strategy around those intrigue cards is tricky because you have to actually find the cards, and it's quite hard to go through the deck and find a specific card. So unless you sort of happen to draw an endgame scoring card from the intrigue deck early on and build towards it, you're more than likely to just draw into one that happens to align with what you're doing already, or not. There is one endgame scoring intrigue card from the expansion, and every time I've seen it come up, the player who got it has won. And I think it's kind of a bad card because it just kind of awards you points for doing everything else that's good in the game. And I kind of don't like that. Um, it came up once when I played the 4-player game, and the chap who had it got 15 victory points and won. It came up in my game at Airecon on Thursday night. I drew the card. I got 15 points and won. So like that card, I think I might take out. I'm not sure. I don't. I think if it gives you, it says if it gives you like 4 criteria. It says if you do like these 4 things at this level, have a point at the end of the game. If you do them all at a better level, you can have 2 points. And I drew it in like the final or penultimate turn of our game at Airecon, and I'd basically done everything on the card, and I just made my final turn, so triggering the slightly better versions of all the criteria, and then I got 2 extra points, which I didn't even need. But it was so easy to do, it just felt silly not to. But I think it's a little telling that you can accomplish the full power of that card right at the end of the game without having even been building towards it. I think that's a bit problematic, and that sort of brings me back to the game where I'm thinking like it is good, but I wonder how much of it is sort of luck of the cards coming out in the market when it's your turn to buy. Because you can't really plan around buying a card. You can plan around buying a card, but you have to sacrifice quite a lot to ensure you get it. And if you don't, then it's going to be, did you get to go first this round? If so, you're going to have there's the market's likely to be the same when you get there because the person that goes first passes first and buys first. Whereas if you didn't go first this round, you're probably just going to have to take up whatever's left after everyone else has bought. And the points themselves, they come from these influence tracks primarily. The guy who won in our 4-player game at the club said, in order to win this game, you need to get about 7 points off of these tracks, and that's just the way it is. So really, everybody's trying to get to 7 points, and so it is just a race to get like 7 points from these tracks, I guess, and then try to make up the rest of the winning points somewhere else or from the alliance tokens. Again, there's going to be more competition over those if there are more players, but so I think that, and that kind of brings me back to it. Like, I think the game, I think it does have a lot of flaws. I think it can be very random, but I don't regret any of my time with it, and I've always enjoyed it, and I won't be disappointed if someone says bring it to the table. So there we go. That's the kind of my baffling opinion on Toon Imperium. And that was the first game we played at Airecon. That's my lecture. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But yeah, I'm excited to see what more they do. I'm sure there's going to be more expansions coming out for it as well. Brian says, we really like it at 2-player and have had a blast solo. I kind of gone off the solo mode, Brian, after I played it on the channel a few times. I felt like I feel like what I like most about the game is the conflict and the sort of like other people maybe taking your spots and things like that. And to an extent, I also think like what kind of deck you build. Like if you're building a deck which plays into the cities and the deserts a lot, and someone else is doing the same, and then a third player has a deck that has a lot of sort of cards that can get into the factions, that player is much more likely to do well because they're going to be able to optimize better based on the spaces available. It's an odd thing. Like it sort of requires like not requires, but there's this sort of contention around spaces, and if 2 players get sort of locked into competing for the same spaces, and a third player is allowed to, or a 4th player even is allowed to sort of be much more free about what they want, they're much more likely to win in that way, which is interesting. But for me, it's the conflict that kind of makes the game. I really like the conflict. It's always good to go into it. In a three-player game, you don't do a third award, so it's always quite contentious. Um, at two, I've enjoyed it. It's much more peaceful. It's much easier to just sort of, at two, you play with an AI controlled player who just kind of poops out workers onto the board to sort of get in the way in a randomized way, and also just kind of has a random military amount in the conflict. It's interesting, but I think it loses some of its luster because it makes the random elements feel even more random. And I found in the solo mode it was much the same. The random elements were even more random. Um, so I think that I'm not particularly. I probably won't go back to. I mean, the two-player game, fine. I'll play that if someone if Leanne suggests it. She quite likes the game. She's enjoyed it too, and that's enough for me to bring it back to the table. But if you're primarily going to be playing it two-player, I probably wouldn't recommend it, unless you're really really into June. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's also obvious from the kind of the structure of the game where you've got AIs at two AIs in solo mode and one AI at two players, that it was really designed for three or four, and I think it is like vastly superior at three and four than it is at solo and two. That's my opinion though. And again, I've always been someone who's enjoyed the more player conflict, the better, as far as I'm concerned, as you might be able to see from my other Airecon picks. So on Friday, I rocked up with a big box full of games, and it was pretty much all the games you see here, with the exception of a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your beetroots, which is the one next to Regicide on Friday night. That was a review copy given to me by my friend Bez. I'll talk about that a little bit later. That's what we call a segue. But the first game, actually, it's funny, when I showed up on Friday, I had this big box with all these games, except for Cthulhu Wars, because we weren't sure if the chap who was sick was going to show up. I wanted him to do a teach of it, but failing in that, another chap, who we're going to call Winnie, for reasons I'll explain later, but Winnie would do a teach in light of our friend not showing up. If it came to that. But I wanted someone to teach it to me and sort of talk us through the basics and how it goes and all that kind of stuff, because I hadn't played it before, and I was really keen to try it. It's been getting a lot of good buzz, and so I managed to get this copy of Cthulhu Wars, and I really wanted to check it out. But we were actually, as we were setting up, everyone wanted to play Ark Nova. Ark Nova was the hotness, and it's been super hype. I've played it at 2 a bunch. I've not played it at 3 or 4. I don't see it getting. I mean, it is like ultimately kind of a racing game. It's a like the Ark Nova is an oddity, because I say it's not. I mean, it is. It's another sort of one that's sort of mechanically. Actually, it's probably still in the hotness here. It's kind of another curiosity, because it sure is. It's number 2 on the hotness under Oak, which is the current Game Brewer Game Found. It's not a Kickstarter. It's a Game Founder that's going live. But anyway, Ark Nova is a tableau building, tile placement situation, and you can see here all these little things moving around, these numbers around the outside of this board in the center, and that's the victory point tracker. And the way it kind of works is that the numbers in the center are your tickets to your zoo. So in Ark Nova, you're building a zoo. I should probably start with that. You're building a zoo, and you're building the zoo in 2 ways. You've got collections of cards that represent the animals and scientists and all manner of people that are working with the zoo. And then you've got another board over here, which is it's like a tile placement puzzle where you build all the enclosures to store the animals. And that's kind of the primary puzzle there. You got action cards along the bottom here. Let's see if we can find some over here. Nope. Again, not my picture, just kind of relying on Board Game Geek for these pictures. But you can see there's a bunch of cards along the bottom here, and these are the actions. And so it's a card row that moves along, like in Civilization New Dawn, if you've ever played that. But you can see that the cards can be on the 1 or 2 side, so you can upgrade the actions over the course of the game. But you can't upgrade them all, so you have to think about which ones you want, which is neat, and I like that. And when you take an action, the card drops into the leftmost position and everything else moves right. So if you repeat an action a bunch, you're only going to get a weak version of it. Whereas if you let it slide all the way into the 5 position, which is off screen at the moment, um, on the rightmost space, then you'll get the most powerful version of it. But you have to take another 4 actions to wait for it to get back there. So you got this action selection mechanism, you got this tableau building situation with your animals and your scientists or sponsorship programs in your zoo here. And then you've got this little tile placement game here as well. And ultimately what you're doing is, as you put animals into the zoo, you're going to get to increase your admissions fees, which are these tickets, and you've got one little token that moves along the tickets. And then as you get animals in your zoo as well, there's you can see up here in the top left, there is 3 of these green cards. There's more along the top as well. These are they're in-game scoring conditions. Not really, no. They're conservation scoring cards, so they have criteria on them, like get animals from this continent, get primates, you release animals into the wild, release a predator into the wild, things like that. So as you complete these conditions, your other token will move along the green track, which is below the admissions tickets. And once they both start on opposite ends of the track, and once the 2 meet, that triggers endgame. So the first person who gets their 2 tokens to meet triggers endgame, and then you have to have some kind of last turn plan or endgame scoring condition that'll shoot your tokens past each other. Because if the 2 tokens meet, your endgame score is going to be like 1 or 2 points. Whereas if the tokens shoot past each other, the gap between them will be your positive score. So if your tokens didn't even meet, you're going to have a negative score at the end of the game. Which is, it's funny, like, there were people sort of getting all up in arms about it. Like, this game's so hard, I had a negative score on my first play, but, like, there's literally no difference if I end the game on 1 point and you're on -10, or I end the game on 11 and you're on 0, right? It's just having a positive number feels better. But it's actually the gap is no different, really. So that's but it's kind of interesting. So I've played it at 2-player a whole bunch. I've really enjoyed it. It's definitely a bit of a goofy one. Didn't the scoring track in Rajas of the Ganges work similarly, says Brian. And Triple L says, do you think Holy Grail's Expedition will challenge this at all? Triple L, I've not looked at it, so I can't say. And Brian says, yeah, Rajas of the Ganges. I'm trying to remember, Brian. I played Rajas once, a long time ago. It's the dice worker placement one, right? Where you can go down the river in the middle. The river mechanism I remember very clearly. Everything else about the game, I don't remember very clearly, possibly because we played it in the pub. But I think it probably does work similarly, because I've heard that from other people as well, saying that the scoring system works similarly to that. So, I mean, again, it's not like a big innovation, this kind of scoring track, and 2 pieces meeting to trigger endgame is not... I mean, even if it is a bit unique, I don't think it's particularly innovative. I do think it's interesting, but it's... I think the fact that you can end up with a negative score, or it's difficult to get a positive score, is more... is something that people have sort of fixated more on, because it's very rare to come away from a Euro game, or a game with sort of Euro sensibilities with a negative score. But that's just kind of how it works out. But, it's essentially... so I sort of described it as a bit of a race game, because essentially you need to keep an eye on what other people's sort of zoos are doing and what their tokens are doing. And if they're getting really close together, you've got to make sure that you've got a plan to get yours closer together, or, because if they end the game and you're still got a big gap that you don't have any plan to close, you're in trouble. Brian says, like, Keymaster and Gatekeeper. Yeah, like Keymaster and Gatekeeper. The 2 tokens. But yeah, so it's I mean, that's the one thing that could improve this game, right? More Rick Moranis. But which could improve literally anything. But yeah, so anyway, the point is, after all of this, like, I've been enjoying my plays of Ark Nova, but I had absolutely no desire to play it at more than 2. Why is it getting so much hype? Triple L, I think it's because it's a compelling puzzle. It does some interesting stuff, and it's largely inoffensive. Like it's one of those games where it's not going to trigger anyone's like, like some people really don't like hidden information. Some people really don't like conflicting games, games where they have to attack people, or games that are very political, like which is the term I use to describe games where you can make targeted attacks on other players. So there's a lot of table talk. Like don't attack me, attack Brian. He's doing way better than me. Or if you attack me here, Brian's just going to go over there and mess you up. That kind of stuff. I describe those games as political because the player discussion is a huge part of them, and we're going to get to look at some of those as we go through this Airecon list. But I think that this fits right into the sort of the some. I mean, and there's some player interaction in this game. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, you have to keep an eye on your friend's zoos to see how their pieces are coming along. You also should keep an eye on their creatures, because some of the creatures have. It's always the snakes, actually. It's really funny. All the snakes have these negative effects that sort of impact other people. Like you have to put a poison on one of your actions or something, and when you trigger that action, you have to discard a card or something like that. So there are these like snakes that can sort of lash out and do little negative effects on you. But it's barely ever come up in our games, and it's not really a big deal. And you can see actually the red on the board here is the 25 is red, because you actually can't be targeted until you have more than 25 admissions. Hey, Morganite, thanks for dropping in. Um, so the so yeah, I mean, I think it's a crunchy puzzle, and it's largely agreeable. It's not going to put anyone off. Um, it's relatively it's a pleasant theme. It's about saving animals. It's got lots of nice pictures of animals. I mean, the art again is like the original Terraforming Mars art, where people were like, "Oh God, it's all crazy stock photos." This is not like much better, but it's still like I don't mind it. I like seeing all the animals. It's interesting. There's some funny stuff. I had a zoo that was like absolute trash in one of my games, which was really funny. So you get some inherent humor coming out of your terrible zoos. I had a British zoo with a British sponsor, and I had like hedgehogs and worms in my zoo. It was stupid. Um, but uh, but yeah, so I mean, I think it's just getting hype because it's sort of like crunchy and inoffensive. It fits firmly in the same category for me as a Terraforming Mars um or a um the big crunchy Uwe Rosenberg, Feast for Odin. There we go, or a Feast for Odin. Um, Feast for Odin is longer than this for sure. I'd say this is possibly around the same length as the core set of Terraforming Mars. It might even actually be a little shorter, depending on really how people are doing, and the sort of the card draw and things like that. Because it's I mean, and Terraforming Mars I think can vary greatly in length anyway, because it really depends on how much people are focusing on terraforming. So they're both quite variable. I'd say they're probably about equitable. I'd say this would probably average out as generally running shorter, but that's at 2 players. Terraforming Mars I think speeds up a lot more than this would with 4, because at 4 in Terraforming Mars there's a lot more terraforming going on, thus hastening the end of the game. In this, it's going to be roughly the same length no matter what player count you've got. Terraforming Mars, of course, gets a lot longer as you start to introduce the expansions. This doesn't have any yet, if they're ever going to do any. But it's an entirely pleasant experience. I haven't regretted any of my time with it, but I'd feel like if I brought this to the table, even with 3 players, I'm probably missing an opportunity to play something with more interaction in it, and that's generally my opinion. But it depends a lot on the players. Like, if I'm playing with people that are, or if people are like, it's a Sunday, we don't really want to worry too much about what attacking or yelling, or we don't have a lot of energy, we just kind of want to sit here and have a nice Sunday afternoon tea and sort of just focus on our little zoo. This would be a great sort of game for that scenario. However, I felt somewhat bad bringing it out as the first game of Airecon, because this is the last choice I would have for a convention. But a lot of my choices at the convention were based around not just myself, but also who was going to be there. I brought El Grande because Fred really wanted to play it, and Spirit Island, and Brian Baru, and The Great Zimbabwe. Those were all games that Fred was super excited to try out, so I brought all of those. Michael loves Orléans, so I brought Orléans to play with Michael. He also loves Regicide, so I brought that for Michael as well. So a lot of these choices were somewhat, based around the fact that they're games that I think are good, that the other players will be excited about playing. And I think that's super important. I was actually reminded over the convention how the best... I think the best sort of recommendation you can make is not necessarily like this game's great or this game's really, really good. It's like, if people are excited about it, and like, I think there's no feeling worse than being sort of the curator of a collection and getting everyone hyped about a game, and then they're all disappointed, or you've sort of talked them into it, and then they're not really excited about it, and then it doesn't go well, And I gotta say, like, I really lucked out at Airecon because everyone who played these games really, really enjoyed them, and really, really had a good time. We had a good time with all of these. Morganite says, I think I'd need someone to teach this to me. I'm very overwhelmed by the playthroughs, and also I've heard it's quite long. Yeah, I mean, if it's your first game of Ark Nova, it's probably 3-4 hours. You could probably get it down to 2 if you're playing reasonably quickly. Yeah, so this is, so Brian's jumping to the end. We'll be talking about it soon, but first, another territory control game. And another game of, so this was my big gamble, because I was setting up Ark Nova for 4, and I was a little concerned that this was going to be not the best use of having 4 players at a table, and we're just going to sit there playing it for half of the Friday, and then kind of be like, that was the same as it was at 2 players, but yeah, it's still a reasonably chill game. I was also playing with Winnie, who's extremely good at engine builders. And although this isn't strictly an engine builder, it's kind of more of a tableau builder. The nuance being that in a tableau builder, you're kind of collecting symbols and things to sort of trigger off point scoring conditions. And in an engine builder, there's usually some kind of point where you collect cards and then fire off the engine, and it produces goods or of value, which Ark Nova doesn't really do. It doesn't really have an engine that you trigger in order to produce income or anything like that. There are income steps in the game that are distinct from your tableau of cards. So it's more of a tableau builder than an engine builder, but I presume that Winnie, who's good at engine builders, would also be good at that. So Wonderland's War I threw in the car because it's a territory control game. I just got it. I really wanted to play it, but it was a bit of a gamble for me because most of the time I only want to bring games that I know will be good, and Wonderland's War is... So it's Skybound Games, Druid City Games collab, designed by Tim Eisner and the other Eisner. And Tim and Ben Eisner, and Ian Moss. So there you go. So it was a Kickstarter that I backed primarily because I liked the look of it, but I was very apprehensive because I hadn't heard great things about the Grim Forest. I heard it was okay, but very light. I've not played it, so I don't know if that's true. But I do have Tidal Blades, which is a game I keep butting heads with because I've only managed to play it at 2 and solo, and I've thought it's borderline broken and unappealing. And I really like the art, and I really like the production, and I really like the components, and the world it's setting up is very intriguing, but I've thought the game mechanisms themselves do not deliver on what they promise and seem entirely too easy. I beat the solo mode on like hard without even really trying on my very first play. Having said that, I've been reassured that it is much better at 4 and 5, which I haven't had a chance to play, so I don't know how true that is, and I don't know if I will get the chance to do that. But it's been sort of sitting there on my sort of like pile of things I should probably take another look at because I have a strong opinion about them, and I don't know why everyone else likes them, but I don't know if I'll ever revisit it. And then Wonderland's War showed up. And Wonderland's War actually seems to have a lot of sort of things in... This is a terrible picture. Actually, do you know, I played this, so we can just look at my photos. So here's the four of us. Michael is there. So it's Michael and me, and there's Fred. And then next to Michael there, that's Winnie, which is WNEE. It's short for why not every expansion? Because that's what he likes to do. He likes to play with every expansion. And next to him is a chap I'm going to call Alice. And I'm using pseudonyms here because I don't know. I didn't check if they'd like me to out their names. But I did post these on Instagram, so this is hardly hidden information. Anyway, Alice because he played Alice. Although he was a Thaqua in Cthulhu Wars. So maybe he's all Thaqua. That's kind of funny. So we had 5, so I was like, okay, let's play the territory control game with the war situation here. And, oh, let's jumping ahead to the next. I don't know how to use Instagram, don't bully me. All of these photos were posted by someone else. Okay, so here's the game. Advanced squad leader, Brian. Nobody needs advanced squad leader. But, yeah, so there's no expansions for Wonderland's War. It was a big Kickstarter, but the Kickstarter just kind of adds additional stuff. But if you have a look at the board here, you can see that what you've got are territories around the outside of the board. You can see the Pool of Tears here, Meadow of Living Flowers, Tugly Woods, and above them points. These are points. There's points around the edge of the board, and whoever has the most points at the end of the game is going to be the winner. And you're going to win those points primarily through winning battles in these territories. There are 3 rounds of the game. There's the blue round, the green round, and then the red round. So the points in each territory escalate. You can see some of them more than others. Tugly Woods goes 4, 6, 10, whereas these other 2 escalate somewhat less. In fact, Meadow of Living Flowers is largely the same throughout. There's also in this little brown holder up here a bunch of quest cards. These are somewhat secret in that each quest card has 2 criteria on it. One thing that you have to do during the game, which might be something like win a battle in the Tugly Woods under certain conditions, and then it'll have another criteria which is endgame scoring. So at the end of the game, meet this condition. And if you do the first criteria during the game, you reveal the card and you say, I've done it. If you never meet that criteria, you keep it face down. Either way, you still get to score the endgame scoring condition, but if you scored both, then you get a bonus of points as well for having done the both. And so that's primarily where you're going to be getting your 2 sources of points. Winning the conflicts, doing the quest cards. And there's 3 rounds of the game. Each round is 2 phases. The first phase is called the Tea Party, which is the center of the board here, where you can see all our little figures are. And they're going to move around the plates, picking up these cards around the outside. And each of the card allows you to do 2 things, pretty much. It allows you to put some of your supporters, which are the wooden meeples here, into the territories, and it allows you to have a special power that's depicted in the center of the card. And that power can be adding chips to a bag, it can be hiring the unique cards in the middle of the board, some of which come with little standees here, which are additional warriors, and or supporters, sorry. They're actually the same as your wooden meeples, but they have powers, special powers, or you can get chips like you see here next on the right that go into your bag. So it's a bag builder in addition to all this other stuff. So there's card drafting, there's bag building, there's territory control, and it is not a heavy game, but it does have a lot of mechanisms. It's the kind of game where if I say to you, do you understand bag building? Do you understand push your luck? Do you understand card drafting and territory control? And if you say, yes, I'm familiar with those concepts, I can teach it to you, no problem. And if you're like, no, I've not played a board game before, we're going to be here a long time. So it's what I would say is a game that's not particularly heavy, but it has a high hobby element, which could be a barrier to entry for people that aren't as familiar with gaming. But perfect fit for our group here because everyone's here at the board gaming convention because they're very, or at least in our group, are very familiar with board games. And so this is kind of the interesting mechanism, right? Because you're hiring these I don't know if I got a picture of the actual tokens. But yeah, everyone's got an asymmetrical board, so you're one of the characters. So it's Alice in Wonderland themed, if that wasn't clear from the name Wonderland's War. This is my board, actually. I'm the Cheshire Cat, and these are my little supporters, and those are my castles. And I had to be the pink cat, because he's so cute. And he takes his head off and stabs it. He's a nutcase. But I don't know if I have any actual good pictures. That's the Jabberwock, which is one of the other characters. And everyone's got a little asymmetrical power and asymmetrical board. But yeah, you can't. I don't really have a good photo of the chips, but there's a big old tray of chips. And the way it's all about combat resolution, really, because what happens is you've got this bag of chips, and you're filling it full of soldiers, and you're filling it. It starts with some of your own guys, and then it starts with some madness tokens, and then you can fill it full of soldiers and better chips and better soldiers. And what's really interesting is when you come to resolving the battles, you basically play this push your luck game that's actually very reminiscent of Quacks of Quedlinburg, where you're drawing chips out your bag, and and if it's a great soldier, you can put it down into the battle, and if it's a madness chip, you have to kill off one of your supporters, and then keep going. And when you run out of supporters, you go bust, and you're completely out of the battle. But you can also hold at any time, and you might come second. Or if you hold when you're in first place, everyone else needs to keep drawing chips until they draw level with you or overtake you, or else they hold as well, and then you win. So it's just like I'm not I can't I mean I played a lot of bag builders. We even played Orleans of the weekend. And I've got Cita Stato here as well that I've been playing, but this is the one where it's like, and I've played Quacks, of course, as well. And Quacks is, of course, like, I think that there's like the two sides of bag building, right? You've got like your Orleans, where you're drawing a number of things out of a bag, and then that's like resources, and you're deciding what to do with them. And then you've got the other side of bag building, which is like Quacks, where it's push your luck. You're just going to keep drawing out the bag until you choose to stop, and it's much more like gambling. And I really like that function of bag building. And in this game, where there's a conflict and everyone's going into their bag and pulling out chips, and then we're all holding our fists over the table like this, like 3, 2, 1, reveal what you've got, And what's really exciting as well is that all the players who are in the game that aren't in a battle can play a wager card on who they think is going to win the battle, and if they get it right, they win a weaker soldier chip to add to their bag. So you can even be getting soldiers during the conflicts, and then there's this whole mechanism where your bags reset and stuff like that. But honestly, it was a real gamble because I wasn't convinced of the designers, and the studio's previous game kind of fell flat with me, and it looked really overproduced. I mean, it looks gorgeous, but sometimes that can be a bit of a crutch. And oh, I gotta say, I absolutely loved this game. It was fantastic. I had such a good time. Everyone that played it had a really good time. It's the perfect venue for it. 5 players, I think, was the best count for it. There's a 2-player variant. I would not be particularly inclined to play this at 2, I don't think. At 5, it was great. I'd happily try it at 4 and 3 as well. But I think, like most of the games of this ilk, it really excels at like full player count. We had such a good time. My one complaint really is that these gray figures, boy, we got real lost in who was what. There's like 5 different characters that all look like eggs, and we're just like, oh, egg army, who's what is going on? We had Humpty Dumpty, who is an egg, and we had Tweedledum and Tweedledee, who look a lot like eggs. And there's some other egg characters as well. I'm just thinking if I can find this. So you can get it with standees. I also have it with the standees, and I think next time I'd be tempted to use the standees, at least until I can get some kind of paint on these miniatures, because there's no bases or anything, and it's very tricky to sort of immediately visualize who's who and what's going on. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and fantastic little game. It's a fantastic big game. It was long. It says, I mean, this is, hang on, I was going to point this out actually on the BGG page here. I think it says, yeah, 45 to 75 minutes. That's a bold-faced lie. Like, I think you would be hard-pressed to do this in under 2 hours. There's not a lot of table talk in this, even though it is a territory control game. Um, there's so many sort of factors that are. I mean, don't get me wrong. There actually was. There was one point where Althaqua and Winnie were really putting up on Michael, and poor Michael, who gets very sort of who wants to please everybody, was getting very flustered by everyone sort of yelling at him, "Don't do this! Don't do that! Go here! Attack that!" But I'd say there's still less of that kind of politics in this than there are in other games. I almost got involved in none of the politics because I was very sort of single-mindedly pursuing my quest cards, and I had kind of a plan overall. It was possibly also because my armies had largely engaged with Fred, and Fred likes to sit quietly and just kind of like Fred's the kind of person who's very into the game, but just kind of sits and watches. Although I gotta say, he got very worked up over El Grande, which I very much enjoyed. Um, Advanced Squad Leader. Squad Leader was my first hobby game back in the 80s. And look how far we've come, Brad. We don't need to play those games anymore. So, Wonderland's War was a gamble in many ways because it's a game about gambling and push your luck. But it was also a gamble because I really wasn't sure if it'd be any good, and it paid off. It was very good. Yeah. Very good indeed. So, after that, we were all extremely tired, and we decided we were all sort of we'd been yelling and shouting for the better part of like I think 3 or 4 hours. So this 45 to 75 minute time frame is maybe for two players that really know the game really well. Brian says, I'm playing Undaunted solo for reinforcements right now. Brian, I have to play that on the channel sometime this month. I was trying to get someone to play Undaunted with me throughout all of Airecon, and nobody would. I wanted to play the 4-player game from Reinforcements, but yeah, so that's something that'll be happening on the channel at some point this month. It'll be North Africa because Osprey Games sent me Reinforcement and North Africa review copies. So, and Eddie says BattleTech was my first hobby game in the 80s. Yeah, I've heard good things. Hager says the solo mode is great, so. Difter says, this month, running out of time, just 2 weeks left. You know, I know, Difter. I know, believe me, I know. So for Science, and if you don't know, there's the designer of For Science is Eric Russ, and he also designed Spirit Island, and you can see they're both here on my list. They're also the only 2 games he's designed, and I brought them both. Fred had just played Spirit Island, the core set, and I said I have a very nice Spirit Island set, so I'll bring that and we can play it, because I'm happy to play Spirit Island anytime. But for Science, it couldn't be less like Spirit Island, so if you know what Spirit Island is, then you will, and I lied, actually. Eric Russ does have, I think, more games than just these 2, but, these are the 2 I played the most of, and I think, does he have, I think he has, like, maybe one other. But for Science, it's not many. Then these are the two sort of big ones. So for Science was a Kickstarter, and I was instantly all in on it. I didn't need to know anything about it, and later on, when I already had it coming, I discovered that it is a real-time cooperative dexterity game, and I brought it to the con because I desperately wanted to play it with a lot of people, and so we immediately followed up Wonderland's War with For Science, and it was great. I loved it. Everybody loved it. It's great. It's so good. It's just as good as Spirit Island. It's great. And it's a sort of a game of like 3 parts, right? So what you're doing here is you're a group of scientists trying to cure diseases, and you have to build up the map for the vaccine. Then you have to model the prototype of the vaccine, and then you can use the outcome of the prototype to buy these DNA tiles here, and you can slot them together, which is like a little mini game. So essentially, in order to win the game, you actually need points on the three ladders here. Can I zoom in on this a bit? Is that something my computer can do? Make it bigger, computer. That didn't help at all. That just made everything else bigger and actually made this smaller. Fine. But there's three. You can see a yellow, blue, and red tracker here. And you're going to get those points off fitting these tiles together. You're going to buy the tiles by building the prototypes, which are based on the designs. So now you have to do all of this in real time, under pressure, collaborating with other people. What's really interesting is I played this at 2, and then I played it at 4, 5, and 6 at the convention. And I mean, it's 15 minutes, right? Like, that you can set the time for anything you want, but it's way easier at 2. Like, it's crazy how much easier this is at 2 players. Like, the extra challenge of trying to communicate with like 4 or 5 other people at the table is like makes it much harder. It's nuts. But it's basically, you can see here what we've got in the labs, which are these 3 areas in the middle of the table with the cards above them. On the board are criteria that we have to meet, and then we're playing cards from our hand, which are these design cards above them, and we're building up these patterns. And the patterns, once they meet the criteria, you have to get someone else at the table to verify that this is a legitimate pattern. And once they've okayed it, then you can go ahead and build it. So you can see down here, someone's making this tower of blocks here, which is actually this pattern here, I think. No, it's not. It's this one here, actually. Oh, this is me, actually. I think I was building this. Sorry? It's my pattern? Yes, this is my pattern. So this pattern here, I'm building the blocks here. And once the blocks are complete, and they have to touch according to the white lines. So certain blocks can only touch certain other blocks, and only certain blocks can be on the table, right? And it looks fairly simple, but honestly, like, it's actually way more difficult than you would think. But then also, like, once you start doing it, you can make it easier if you're sort of like thinking about the blocks in creative ways. But then also it gets like much harder as well. Like, it's really interesting. It's really sort of unexpected the way it comes together, but it comes together so well. And yeah, so then once someone's verified that design, essentially it spits out some points that you can use to buy the tiles up here. And then someone can be playing a little game where they put the tiles together. And we gave Michael that job because he's really good at like sort of tile placement, sort of patterns and stuff like that, like little roll and writes and things like that. He's just naturally really good at that kind of stuff. So we just put him in charge of the tiles, and it was really funny because he sat there basically the whole game trying to make the pattern and optimize it. And then we just kept throwing more and more tiles at him. And then right at the 0 hour, like, we just got all of our points because Michael had just finally finished his sort of first take on it. And he got so many points out of it that the game was just won. But there's lots of... you need to open the pick in its own tab. I don't know if I can do that on the Instagram website. Anyway, so yeah, Michael in charge of tile optimization. Screen counter 0. Yep. But there's loads of ways to escalate the difficulty of the game, and all the characters have powers, and they're all fun and different. At one point, Winnie was playing as a robot, so for the whole game he couldn't talk, he could only click and hum, and he had to try and communicate that way. But as an offset, he could have like way more design cards in his hand. It was just great. I think it's a real winner. If you get a chance to acquire a copy of this game, I highly recommend it. But if you don't think you're going to be getting... First off, it's real time, so it's fun stress, right? Everything would... And you don't have to play with the timer. You can play without the timer and just try to optimize your score. Which I think is fine, but I don't think you'll be getting the most out of the product then. So I think, I mean, if this sounds appealing to you without the timer, by all means, go crazy. But I definitely think, like, if you're the kind of person that likes that sort of fun stress element of real time, this is great. The manic cooperation is great. if that sounds appealing to you. And the dexterity element is a ton of fun as well. People were just sitting and playing with these blocks and having a great time. Yeah, I mean, you know, some people really don't like that real time element. Alfaco played 2 games with us, so full credit to him for trying, but he wasn't into it. He's like, I don't like doing this stuff under pressure. So he bowed out of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th game. But we played this a bunch of times back to back because everyone got really into it. And so that is for science. It was great fun. And then after that, we have I think we had a quick game of Quest, which I don't have any photos of. Quest is the follow-up from. The Quest is the follow-up from. Now let's see, I've put it in full screen mode and I can't get out of it. It's the follow-up by. Oh, I've forgotten his name and I feel bad. What have I forgotten? Don Eskridge. It's Don Eskridge. I didn't actually look that up. I'm still on BGG for science. But you can see the stars here. We didn't use the star pieces. That's like an extra expansion. Just another way to make it harder. If you're familiar with Spirit Island and you know about all the different ways you can increase the difficulty of Spirit Island, this comes with just as many ways to make it harder and escalate the game. And there are event cards too that you can throw in, which we played with the event cards, and they are great, but a lot of them require sort of physical activities, you know, like you know, everyone says something in unison or get up and run around the table, that kind of stuff. Some of them are just like add mutations to the builds, but the mutations are a secondary card that add another criteria to the virus, and oftentimes they can be very silly as well. You know, things like build it with just one hand, or some other player has to hand you all the pieces, or you have to keep your head touching the table while you're building it. It's just, if that kind of goofy fun sounds like appealing to you, this is a great game. And if it doesn't sound appealing to you, then that's fine. I won't judge you openly on the stream. And so we've got Resistance Avalon. Is the classic Resistance game follow-up to the Resistance, which is the futuristic game of going on missions and trying to work out who's working for the mean government and who's a freedom fighter. That became the Resistance Avalon, where you're trying to work out who are the noble knights of the Round Table and who is working for the villainous Morgana. And that became Quest, which was a Kickstarter a little while ago. And it's I mean, you know, it's billed as a separate game, but it really is just a streamlined version of Avalon. So what Quest does is it puts a lot more information into the game. There's a lot more ways to check information in the game, and it plays faster as well. So you go on fewer quests. Because the way the game works is it's one of those hidden role games. Everyone gets a card at the beginning of the game with a role on it, which tells you whether you're ordinary good guy, ordinary bad guy, or special good guy, or special bad guy. And special good guy Merlin knows who all the evil villains are, but can't out themselves as a good guy, because if the villains figure out who Merlin is, the villains win the game, and you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's got all those sort of nice secret bits of information, and over the course of the game you're trying to work out who's who by going on quests. And when you go on a quest, everyone gets a good guy, a success and a failure card, and the bad guys want to play the failure cards, and the good guys want to play the success cards, but the bad guys can't openly talk about anything or they'll out themselves as bad guys, so they have to try to like sort of put in one fail card, because if they all put in fail cards and they're all in the same quest, they'll just immediately out themselves all as villains, because the bad guys never play fails. So there's this whole kind of situation going on, and Quest almost feels a bit like almost like, I think it leans into the mechanisms of the game, so you need to be a bit more on the ball with the mechanisms of the game in order to suss out who's who. So there's more information for deducing, and there's less sort of just sort of shouting and trying to read people to an extent. Um, but I think I think it is an improvement. I really enjoyed it. We played it with 8, which is a great number for it. It goes apparently it's good at all player counts. I think the minimum is 4 and the maximum is 10, or maybe more. It probably says right here. 10. Best 6 to 8. There you go. But it also comes with the publisher's recommended starting roles. So it comes with a ton of roles, and you can pick which roles you want to play with, and that's going to change the sort of the way the game is laid out. Indie Boards and Cards are the original publisher, so they wrote the rule book and everything. But the Kickstarter came with the sort of curiously titled Director's Cut Don Eskridge edition, which was basically a series of role configurations laid out by Don, and he just said, this is my take on what you should play with, and it differs somewhat to the Indie Boards and Cards take on the roles you should play with. So we jumped straight to the Don Eskridge cut, and we just played that, and we only got one game in, but people were asking to borrow it over the weekend, and I felt bad because I didn't bring it back on Saturday or Sunday. I left it at the hotel, or the Airbnb. So it was everyone who played it really liked it and said they thought it was probably the best version of the game so far. Like I said, it leans a bit more into the mechanisms, so I think it is going to be more appealing to people who really like to sort of pay attention to the details of the rules and the information. And it's probably going to wind up being a bit less shouty. So if that sounds appealing, then this is probably the right version for you. I think if I was playing with people who were not familiar with the genre, I might bust out Avalon first, because Avalon tends to be a little more forgiving if you don't grasp all the nuances of the rules. I think if you weren't sort of really up on what could potentially happen in the game, it would be quite easy to put your foot in it. Which is fine, because that's kind of how these games work anyway. Like, to an extent, the game is sort of like waiting for someone to slip up, and then someone else goes, "Aha, that means you're the bad thing." And then you're like, no, you're saying that because you're the bad one. Like, if you don't make any mistakes, then there's no game, right? The games are all about human error, right? Like, that's how we win and lose. But this is definitely a little bit more demanding in terms of mechanisms, I think, but only slightly, ever so slightly. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. A really good version, and I think it's like £17 or £18 for Quest, so it's great. That was a big success. And then after that, Michael and I decided to play The Quest for El Dorado, which is a race game from Reiner Knizia. It came out in 2017. It was recently republished with tool art, and we played with Alfaqua and our new friend Conquistador. Oh, you can't see the photo. There we go. And it wasn't going very well for me when I took this photo, but I did end up winning this one. And this is another great example. So what it is it's a deck builder race game. So you can see here we've all got little meeples on the land track here, and then there's a marketplace of cards above it. And the marketplace it's actually kind of an interesting hybrid between like the market row you might find in something like June Imperium or the Realms games, and Dominion, the other kind of deck builder where all the market is available the whole time. In that the market is 6 cards that are constantly available, but there's only 3 cards in each stack, and once the stack is empty, then the next person can buy any of the cards that are above it. You can see here a bunch of cards already missing, but you can buy any of those cards above it, and it drops into the market row and becomes available. Speak of the devil. I'm not going to answer this live on stream because I don't think it's very nice to ambush someone. Did you know you're alive? But But he probably noticed like some inaccuracy. He's like, hey, you didn't mention I won that other game. Um, um, Difter says, this always reminded me a bit of Clank in a way. I mean, do you know, Clank is actually from the same designer of Dune Imperium. And I find, actually, that Clank and Dune Imperium feel like the deck building feels a lot more in common than... I mean, I always thought the deck building in this felt quite unique, and I'm going to arrive at the point why in a minute. And those of you that know the game will see that this is actually the very first scenario from one of the expansions called Heroes and Hexes. I was going to set up the main game only, and not... I have both expansions in the box, but I couldn't find the scenario book for the core game, so we just set up the first scenario from Heroes and Hexes, which just uses these little gold coins and these little guardian tokens to sort of make things, and it adds these temples with the different crystals. So essentially what you do is you all start where the white meeple is there, and you have 2 meeples, and your meeples have to run to each of the 3 temples around the board. You can see a little bit of the red gems, the green gems as well, and there's blue gems over on the left. You have to collect one of each gem, and then one of your meeples has to get back to the starting line, basically. And the first person to do that wins the game. And so, yeah, so when someone buys a card from the market, it just drops into the market row, and then the market row is full again, potentially, until someone buys another card. You can see here we're, I think... we've been deck building a lot. Like, it's very interesting, this game, because sometimes people just tear off from the starting line, and other times people sit on the starting line for round after round after round, just buying cards. But your turns are very, very fast. Like, you have a hand of 4 cards, but you maybe rarely play them all out in a single round. You can keep them round to round if you want to try and collect a sort of a set you need, because the cards allow you to do 2 things fundamentally. They allow you to buy more cards, and they allow you to traverse the landscape. So you can see the landscape have all these different colors. The different colors have little symbols on them. And those little symbols are essentially the cost to walk onto the space. So really what you're doing is you're just using the cards to walk around the map, and you can always sort of divide down. So if you have a card that, say, has 2 desert symbols on it, 2 torches, you can move over 2 1-torch spaces. So 2 torches on a single card lets you move over 2 single torch spaces, or into 1 2-torch space. You can see up here we've got actually a set of jungle spaces. Maybe it's a bit small. I do apologize for that, but there's a 1, a 2, and a 3 jungle space. But you can't pair up. So if you have 2 single jungle cards, they can't allow you to enter a single double jungle space. You need a double jungle card, so you need to upgrade the cards in order to traverse the world. Having said that, the racing is really, really, really tight. Like, you can build an incredible deck and just spend like the whole first half of the game building an incredible deck, but if someone's set off, they could beat you with like the basic cards if you let them get too much of a head start. And he says, I wasn't a fan of deck building games until I played Blood Rage. Is it Blood Rage? I would call Blood Rage card drafting. I hate to be nitpicky, Eddie, but I wouldn't call it a deck building game, personally. But it does have, I suppose, an element of... Well, it's got asymmetrical powers. And I suppose... but you don't really have a deck of cards in Blood Rage. However, Blood Rage is great, and you are correct to be a fan of it, regardless of what we choose to call the mechanisms. But in this one, you've got a hand of cards you're cycling. You can see my yellow board down here. I've got some draw cards here on the left, discard pile on the right, and those cards tucked under there are cards I've trashed, which means get them out of my deck. They're shitty, and I don't want them. Yeah, so it's what was really amazing about this was that Alfaqua spent the game building an incredible deck, and he bought all the cards I wanted, and I couldn't get any of the cards I wanted. And so I just kind of set off with the hope that I would win, and it came down to the wire with just like a round between us. So, and he says, correct, but it's what got me interested in trying them. Fair enough, Eddie. And what is your favorite deck building game now? But yeah, so I think wrote to Eldorado, got Quest for Eldorado. Always happy to play it. It's great. It comes with a ton of replayability out the box because it's very modular. It's got all these modular boards. It's got tons of stuff you can add if you want to make it bigger. I've not really had a chance to explore it much because it doesn't get to the table as often as I'd like. But it's reasonably light, but the turns happen so fast, and there's just like one or two interesting decisions. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot, and I was happy to play it. Actually, this was one I brought because Fred wanted to play it, and he didn't get to play it because he was too busy playing PAX Palmer 2nd Edition. But yeah, that's my El Grande story. I was gonna say, actually, that just reminded me that Wonderland's War seems remarkably replayable as well. Like, you got this big deck of Wonderland cards in the middle here. That's a market row that comes out, and we barely saw any of them in the game. You can see the scoring tiles for each of the territories can be randomized. There was 2 that I think weren't in play. You don't go through all of the cards in each stack of cards in each game. But also you can see up here there are these 6 tarot cards in front of my play area. I don't know if I have a better photo of them. You can see them here as well. And these are the powers of all the chips, right? So there's 6 different soldiers you can get in the game to put into your bag, basically. Don't know how to use Instagram. But the different soldiers that you get into your bag, they all have different abilities. And I mean, actually, that's not true. There's 5 different soldiers. One of them is called the Forge token. And it's still a token you put in your bag, a chip you put in your bag, but it keeps its power no matter what. But the other 5, their powers are all determined by what's on these cards, and it comes with 4 cards for each chip. So you can play with 4 different sets for the chips, and you can even randomize it. But it says they've been balanced in sets, so if you randomize it, it's going to be total anarchy. But it's just going to be... it just felt like there was a lot of replayability to explore in the game. And the sets also escalate, so they're called A, B, C, and D, with D being the most sort of intricate rule set, and A being the most straightforward, so you can somewhat tailor it as well to whoever's at the table. So that felt really great. Brian says, you make it sound interesting, but I can't get past the Alice theme. Yeah, I mean, I'm not I mean, Alice in Wonderland is not a theme that I feel strongly about one way or the other necessarily. I think the books are interesting, but certainly for like a war game, it feels like kind of an odd theme. But the art's really cool. It's really funny. One of the soldier tokens here is a flamingo, and there's a hedgehog riding it. So it's all kind of wacky madness stuff. You also get these madness tokens, which are here in the center of the board, and they're negative points at the end of the game. So it leans into the theme well. It utilizes the theme well. I definitely appreciate if it doesn't do anything for you, but I do think it's a unique enough game that it offers enough to keep it interesting, even if the theme isn't really grabbing you. But I appreciate, that there's a lot of games out there, so why not find one with a theme that does get you? Quest for Eldorado. So I think I've said, oh, I liked my own photo. I didn't even know I could do that. Why do... That feels a bit like... Okay, do you know what? Whatever. What's next? Okay, the big one. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm just gonna catch up on chat real quick for a minute. That's we're basically at the end of the Friday. Now we just got Friday night. Eddie says currently Arkham Horror LCG is my favorite, followed by Marvel Champions and Hero Realms. That's fair enough. I don't know. We've discussed Marvel Champions somewhat. I think, Eddie, you and I, but like Arkham Horror LCG is 100% a deck builder, but also not, because it's a game where you build your deck before the game rather than during the game. And did it? Sorry, Difter. Yeah, it's these classical music tracks. There is supposed to be a leveler on here, but it doesn't work perfectly. I mean, I have a hard time getting into LCGs just because building a deck always felt kind of like homework to me. I think you either love it or you hate it. When we played Arkham Horror on the channel, Barry's really good at it, and he knows that really well, and I was just like, Barry, you do it. Build my deck for me and make it good. But I love deck building in games. I like it when it's part of the game, but I can't be doing it ahead of time. I don't know if that's if you also have to deck build ahead of Marvel Champions, Or is it more like, I mean, what I like about Arkham Horror in theory is that you sort of build the deck as you go through the campaign, right? I'd definitely be out for playing like an Arkham Horror LCG campaign, but there's way too many unfinished campaigns on my channel already, and I don't actually own any of it because of the deck building stuff. Eddie says, Mystic Vale has been fun. Aha! Funny you should mention that, Eddie. I have recently been playing Dead Reckoning, and I have many thoughts. Which is the latest John D. Clare transparent card thing. Brian Ross says, the only deck construction game I could get into is Star Wars Destiny. I played that when it first came out, and I quite enjoyed it, Brian. But not enough to buy, like, more cards or anything. And Vladimir says, yeah, any deck building before the game starts to feel more like setup. I mean, I think that people are very divided on this, Vladimir. Some people love it, and some people get super into it. You know, they're the competitive LCG players, right? The ones who are like, okay, I'm going to have to change this one card or tweak this one thing, you know, to get ahead of the meta or to surprise people. They think they know what my deck's doing, but they don't. You know, and I presume it's the same sort of skill set that gets you into something like the cooperative LCGs like Marvel Champions and Arkham Horror. But you and I are in the same camp where it feels to me more like setup and something I have to do because we can't play if I don't. And Brad says, oh, I need to learn more about what you thought of Dead Reckoning. Well, maybe at the end during the Q&A, Brian. We can't derail the Airecon breakdown because it's taking a long time already. Oh, Michael's being very polite and very English. And he says, I need to try Lost Ruins of Arnak eventually. I played it with... So, CG were very, very kind to send me a review copy, and I played it with 4 with the I've played it on BGA on the channel with Hexy, and I played it in real life with 4 players with the Expedition Leaders expansion. And yeah, I like Arnak well enough. I don't have strong opinions about whether or not I like it more or less than June. I actually think I probably like it about the same. I think I like the conflict in June a little better and the deck building in Arnak a little better. I like the conflict in June a lot because it really adds much needed player interaction. Arnak is somewhat lacking in that. But I like the deck building in Arnak. Even though it's still Market Rose, there's 2 of them. It feels easier to trash cards and sort of make a leaner deck. I really like the deck building aspect in Arnak, but for whatever reason, June seems to be the more popular game. I think possibly the IP is doing a lot for it. It just seems to get to the table much more easily than Arnak. Brian says, meta is a 4-letter word to me, just like sleeves. It's just... Are you saying you're not into the meta, Brian? I mean, to be fair, there's no... I mean, I would say there was no meta for something like Arkham Horror because it's not competitive, but I don't know if I'm in an Arkham Horror group on Facebook or something. I think I must have joined it back when we made the videos because I see these Facebook posts all the time, like people posting memes and things about decks, certain decks and deck construction and all that kind of stuff. So there definitely is a meta around the different characters' decks. Anywho, moving on to the next thing. What's the next thing? Right, back to Airecon. So Friday night, after we got back to the flat from the convention, we played Regicide, and we played a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your beetroots. Which I don't have the box art for, so this is the slight variant box art. A game about grabbing creatures that are totally different, that are completely different, that are totally different, and counting your turnips. But more on that in a minute. I have some extra photos here from Airecon that you guys didn't see. This is the photo of us that weren't posted to Instagram. And my hair looks super greasy in all these photos because I forgot my comb. So I just put gel in my wet hair to try and get it under control, and it just looks greasy as hell in all these photos. But never mind. Yeah, we were playing Regicide because Fred wanted to try it, and Michael and I played it at Essen. I brought it to Essen. We really liked it. It's such a small game. I just throw it in my bag wherever I go. If you don't know anything about Regicide, it's a game that's played with a standard deck of 52 cards, and basically what you do is you make a pile of cards that are escalating with the jacks on top and the kings at the bottom, queens in the middle, and you fight. Essentially, you are teams of adventurers trying to kill all the royals and free the kingdom, I guess, from their tyrannical rule. And you play cards from your hand. It's cooperative. You're all working together. You play cards from your hand in order to try and defeat the royals. And if you ever take damage with no cards in hand or run out of cards in the deck, then you lose the game. And it's notoriously difficult. But between the three of us, we totally won it. We smashed it. We won it on our second game, and I was super duper duper pleased to win it. Michael and I struggled with it at Essen, possibly because we were really tired or drunk. I can't remember, but it's a really interesting little game. All the different suits have different powers. So like the clubs cards do double damage, and the hearts cards allow you to replenish cards in the big main deck here, so you don't run out of them as quickly. And the diamonds are how you draw more cards into your hand. And there's this sort of function where you have to deal a certain amount of damage to the royals in order to kill them. And if you get it like spot on, you know, like a blackjack without going bust, you actually get to take the royals and put them on top of your draw deck. It's just, the thing is, you can play this with any set of 52 cards, and the rules are downloadable on BGG. So you can just grab like those rules and just play this game. You don't need to buy anything. This is the Badgers from Mars Kickstarter version, which you can buy from their website now. I think you can get it lots of places. But the art is really nice and sort of fits in with the theme of the game really well. And I do like it. I played it with Fred and Michael on Friday night, and on Saturday they both went and bought it. And if Michael, and to be fair, Michael's buying it for his brother. But if Michael bought a game, you know that it's got to be really good, because usually just plays my copy. So, Regicide. Absolutely can recommend. It's not even that expensive. Hell, you can play it for free if you just download the rulebook. And the other game we played was a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your beetroots. I do have a copy right here. This is a review copy that Bez gave me because I know her from our board game club. She was actually playtesting this down at the club a few times, and she makes lots of quirky little card games that are very fast to play and very easy to teach, and they're always sort of quirky and fun. This one has become... It's slightly different. I played the turnip version. Now it's beetroots. Apparently there is a beetroot version. I think this is live on Kickstarter right now. So I think that these are the sort of her early print run copies. And I think you can go and back it on Kickstarter. I think it's live now. If it's not, I'm sorry, Bez. But Stuff by Bez is her company. She didn't ask me to shill it or mention it, just like Fred didn't ask me to mention his game. So full disclosure, these are people I know. I'm obviously biased, but I also have really enjoyed their games. And I wouldn't probably talk about them if I didn't, because that would be super awkward. But this game is super simple. You've just got a bunch of creatures, and they all kind of have wacky heads and legs and torsos. And some of them are kind of the same. Like you can see that the two on the left and right here have two torsos they're technically the same, even though they're slightly different positions. And they might, like the two on the one in the middle and the one with the... You can see they've got the same legs, basically. The two on this side have the same set of legs. Basically, it's super... And then there's some beetroots in here somewhere. This hasn't been shuffled, so the beetroots are here. Well, it's super simple, the game. All you do is you turn it face down, and you shuffle up the cards on the table, just spread them out randomly, and then people just in real time just grab cards. And what they do is they can only grab one card at a time. They hold their deck in their hand like this, grab another card, check to see if any of the parts match. If any of the parts match, you can't use it. So these both have mermaid tails, so you have to put that one back, and you put it back face down because you don't want anyone else to see it. And then you just have to grab another one. And you need to basically create a stack of cards that don't match. So once everyone's created a stack of cards, you're going to pass them around the table. Everyone's going to check, and if they find body parts that match in your deck, you're out of the game. So you have to have the most cards without creating any matches. And what's really interesting is that you can reset the whole thing by putting a beetroot into it. So if you have a beetroot between two matching cards, that's okay because it resets the matching line. But if you have five, I think five's okay. If you have more than five beetroots in your deck at the end, then you're also out. And that's the whole game. It takes like 3 minutes to play. It goes up to 3 players, but if you have 2 decks like this, you can play up to 6. And we were playing that on Friday night and having an absolute blast. Fred went out and bought it as well, so there you go. It's just really cute and simple, good fun. It's quick, takes 30 seconds to teach. I just taught you the whole game, and now you can just play it. It's great. This is one game that I could actually play with my mother, who refuses to abide by any rules. She's an absolute cheater, and she'll get disqualified at the end of this game if she didn't pay attention. So, that's that. And so then we're into Saturday, and unfortunately our friends still hadn't shown up, so it was up to Winnie to teach us Cthulhu Wars, and we played Cthulhu Wars with 4 of us. Oh, Eddie says, what's the age range for a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your beetroots? Good question. Bez says 6 and up on here. I'm inclined to agree. I don't really know anything about children, so I don't know if that's true. But yeah, I think you don't need to be particularly old to play this game. So, yes, Cthulhu Wars. So I just super quick setup and tear down as well, because part of the game is putting the cards into a stack. Hager says, "What about Mental Age?" Yeah, you and I probably can't play this, Haggers. We're too young. If beyond us, we need to get Bez to make a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your beetroots junior, just for us. Eddie says, cool, I think my grandnephew would enjoy it. Quite possibly. I think this one is good. I also really like her game. I actually have one around here too. Another one of her games. Which is a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them by making strange noises. After someone makes noises. This is also a good one. It's just, you just reveal a set of cards, and then the person who revealed the cards has to make a noise, and then you have to guess which of the monsters face up on the table made the noise, basically. So you have to try and sort of make clever noises. It's also a good simple fun. And they're so cheap as well, like the deck of cards, so you can't... These ones are easy to recommend, without too much concern. So then back to this. Yes, Cthulhu Wars. The big, the epic, the great Cthulhu Wars. Yes, so we played it with 4 of us. Michael played, although this is probably his least favorite kind of game. Fred played. He was super excited to try it, as was I. And Alfaqua played it as well with us. And I was crawling Chaos, which is the Natharlatep side, which is a Corset faction. Fred was the Black Goat of the Woods. I can't remember what they're called in the game, but that's the god anyway. And Michael was Cthulhu. These are all Corset teams. And then Alfaqua was Elfaqua, which is the winding, the something or other. They're an expansion. Yep, this was my first play of Cthulhu Wars, and I've heard a lot about it. People have said I'd really like it. It's very similar to games that I like, but it's very expensive and hard to come by. And so I'd gotten lucky and managed to find sort of a set on the secondhand market, and I got the price down by trading stuff for it. So that was good. And it came with a bunch of random bits in it, so I wasn't really sure entirely what I had. But it looks like whoever put the set together was quite sensible, because they've sort of bought the same kind of stuff I would get, which is to say a lot of extra armies, or well, two extra armies and the dice, but not like all the sort of plastic gubbins. Like you can get so much aesthetic plastic for this game that it goes bananas. And Eddie, yeah, the Wendigo. So the Thakwa comes with two elder gods, which you can actually kind of see on the table here. Um, that's the pale blue army. So the big miniatures of the elder gods. This must be some later stage in the game because we've all got our elder gods on the table. And I mean, the game does not like it. It lasts a fair amount of time if you're new to it, but it's not like a massively long game. But it's only like 6 rounds or something. Um, yeah. When are we gonna repeat Until Dawn? I was gonna say when are we gonna play Until Dawn 2, but there's not. I'm not gonna start talking about the dark um those games. I'm not. I just stop derailing you guys. I'll have a chat at the end. But yeah, this was so the game. It's not territory control. It's a war game. You've got to control the altars. There's sort of 3 sets of soldiers. You got your little acolytes here. They become monsters. The monsters are unique to each faction, and then you got your gods here as well. The elder gods. Everyone's got one. This is mine, Natharlatep. Got some kind of law. That's El Fakwa there. And these are my polyps, my flying polyps. Uh, there, it's that's my Night Gaunt, I think they're called. Anyway, my faction is just annoying. I mean, they're great for me, but they just annoy everyone else. Tricky to play though, I thought. Tricky to do well with. Um, Fred won this one actually, which so that was good. Good for the black goat of the woods, which is sort of like a creeping fungus. Really, it just kind of gets out, and that's kind of the way the game is. Basically, the game itself on the table, you're controlling territories. All the territories are about 3 spaces away from any other territory, so you can move around the board real fast. And you're trying to build up these altars, but the monsters can statch up the acolytes, so you got to keep your acolytes protected with monsters. But you only have so many miniatures, and you're either going to wind up in lots of conflicts or you're going to run out of miniatures. Um, but in any case, it's just this sort of like brutal, quick war game. And what you've got here is you can see in front of Alfaqua there are these 5 spell books on his player board and one that's not. The spell books are powers. They're asymmetrical powers. So everyone starts with asymmetrical monsters, which all have unique powers, as well as some faction power as well. That's different. And then what you do is you unlock your spell books as you go through the game, and each space in which you place the spellbooks has unique criteria to unlock it. And the 6 you need are going to be unique to your faction. So the factions are very, very, very asymmetrical. But the one thing that you all have in common is that you have 6 spellbooks you can unlock, and you cannot win the game unless you unlock all 6 spellbooks. So there are 2 ways the game can end. Either someone hits 30 points on this victory point track here, or we get to this. This is called the ritual of annihilation. And if we commit the ritual a certain number of times, the world is annihilated and the game ends. And you get points when you do the ritual, and it gets increasingly more expensive. So they're sort of tied together, these 2 functions. But certain factions like mine and Michael's want the game to end more quickly, whereas Fred and Alfaqua's factions, they grow a lot more powerful over time. So it almost behooves them to drag the game out a little longer and prevent us from winning quickly. Um, Highly political, lots of table talk, lots of asymmetrical powers, and they're all really unique and nuts. I had a great one where, like, one of my powers, just to give you a sense of it, like, one of my powers was literally, I can steal, I roll a die, a d6. So my power, there's like essentially sort of, it's actually a lot like Blood Rage, Eddie, in the sense that, what you've got is 2 main rounds in 2 main phases in a single round, right? The first important phase is actions. Everyone takes turn taking an action. And their actions are things like summon more monsters, move things around the board, build an altar, put an acolyte on an altar, stuff like that. But or start a battle, start a fight with someone. But all of these actions cost power, and you only have a certain amount of power. Just like in Blood Rage, you have a certain amount of rage. And then once you're out of power, you're out of the round. You can't do any more actions. So the amount of power you have determines how much you can do, and you have to spend it wisely to try and get the most out of it. And the person who's last spending power in the round will have some amount of full information that they can exploit to their advantage if they can figure out the best way to do that. So the first phase is, well, actually, I guess there's 3 phases then. So the first phase is take a bunch of actions. The second phase is everyone gets some power, and then the third phase is everyone gets points. And you can, if you want, spend your power to commit the Ritual of Annihilation, which is going to get you even more points and progress the game towards the end of the game, but then you have less power going back into the action phase for the next round, so you'll be able to do less stuff. So these are the kind of trade-offs you're considering. But it's all very simple. I mean, that's basically the whole game explained. And then everything else, all the complexity comes from the factions, how they behave, and what they do. And the rulebook does a really good job of sort of giving you an introduction to the factions, explaining how they behave, what you need to do to defeat them and overcome them, and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, a really wild ride, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. One of my powers was that in the, or one of my Elder Gods abilities on the spellbook. And the spellbooks are not all about your Elder Gods. They're all different manner of powers. Some of them power up your monsters. Some of them just give you things you can do. But one of my abilities was I can just throw a die, a d6, and I can steal that much power from the other players at the table. But the deal is this, like, I have to give them 1 minute between the rest of them to determine who's going to give what power over. And if they can all come to a unanimous agreement over who's paying, then before the end of the minute, then that's what happens. And if the minute goes up and they haven't come to an agreement, then I just choose who I take the power from. And a whole nother round of negotiations begins. Which is pretty funny. Like, it's a really interesting game. But I like that kind of sort of design spirit, that really appeals to me. So I really enjoyed our play of Cthulhu Wars, and I'd really like to get it back to the table sometime soon. And I think I have 2 of the additional factions in this box. I'd be so tempted to go out and get some more factions, but I don't know where to get them, and I didn't back the Kickstarter, so maybe this is just it. But it's already so expensive. Like, that's the thing. I think, like, it's so expensive. It's an enormous amount of plastic. I mean, don't get me wrong. People were constantly stopping to look at these models, and there's something immensely fun about putting out the Elder Gods and moving them around. It's also actually kind of cool that they're colored, because if you don't have the time to paint them, it looks way better than just gray plastic. And what's also nice is that everything's very distinct. It's very easy to sort of spot what is going on the board, even though it's very busy. And generally speaking, the size of the miniature is kind of an indicator of its strength, because there's a very clear hierarchy to the creatures. And so you can generally tell sort of how scary something is by the size of the miniature, which is actually really useful. But yeah, that was, so I really enjoyed Cthulhu Wars, and I'd happily play it anytime. Michael didn't, and I don't think he wants to play it again. It's definitely the most sort of political game we played all weekend. It's super shouty. Although I suspect if I was playing it and he didn't have anything better to do, he'd put up with it for me. And after that, we all needed a break because we're really sleepy, because the War of the Elder Gods is tiring. So we played Orleans. And this was an interesting one, actually, because Orleans is a game that Michael really likes. I brought it because he likes it, and he wanted to play it. And we played it 3-player with Michael and Winnie and I. Winnie hadn't played it before. And Winnie totally smashed it. But Orleans, do you know what's funny? I taught it to Michael probably about 4 years ago or something, and we haven't really had much chance to play it since. We actually played Orleans Stories more recently, which I can talk about in a minute. But if you don't know Orleans, so this is my version of the game. It's somewhat upgraded. There was a deluxe edition that had, so it's a bag builder. you're getting all these workers from these various tracks, putting them in a bag, and then you've got these private boards, and you're pulling out the workers to trigger action spaces on your private board. So, here you can say I've triggered the wagon. Um, and yeah, Michael, exactly, going from a game that he really didn't like to his favorite game. But yeah, so you're pulling out. Anyway, there was these meeples are cardboard tokens in the retail version of the game. There was a deluxe edition that came with plastic discs, chips to replace them. I didn't get that. I bought this somewhat later, but there was a company in Germany that made these meeples, so I got these wooden meeples as a replacement for the wooden the cardboard tokens, and they're very pleasing. God damn it. They are very pleasing. So yeah, I mean, the game is basically this. It's 18 rounds, I think, and then the game ends. Most victory points is the winner, and you're just sort of... You're buying... on your turn, you're putting people down onto your player board to trigger actions, so there's a sort of an action selection element. And the actions may allow you to move around this board here and collect these tokens, which are worth points. You can also, as you do this, build these trading posts, which get you points at the end of the game, and you can also buy additional villagers to put in your bag. And as you buy the villagers off the board here, then you escalate up these tracks, and the tracks allow you to do different things. The farmer track at the top here just lets you get more tokens that are worth points. The track below it lets you put these wheels out, which are called technology. They go onto your board and block off player spaces, so you can put them down in these positions where you see villagers would go, and then it becomes more efficient to trigger those actions. The traders here, these are called traders. Those are craftsmen, farmers, craftsmen, traders. The traders allow you to buy buildings, which I don't think I have a picture of here, but the buildings are additional. You can see I've got one up at the top of my board, kind of hiding behind the box here, and Michael's got one over there, and Winnie's holding them. But these buildings are additional worker placement spaces, so you can customize your board over the course of the game by buying additional worker placement spaces. Which only you can access. Only you ever play to your board. It's not worker placement, really. It's action selection, because, I mean, your selection is limited by what you've pulled out your bag, but you're never competing for these spaces. However, you do compete to pick up the tokens on this board up here. So there's a little race element going on up here. But you can buy the additional buildings by going up the trader track here. Then there's the fisherman. Going up the fisherman track gets you these coins, which are just victory points. There are event tiles. But I guess I'll get to that in a minute. But generally speaking, you don't really spend the coins on anything. You just use them to get points at the end of the game. The knights here allow you to draw more figures out your bag each round, so you can do more stuff. And then the track at the very bottom here, which is kind of off the screen, is the Grey Scholars. And they just give you these knowledge points, which advances you up a track at the bottom of the board that increases your in-game score. And then at the top in the left here, you've got the Yellow Monks, who are wild. They can be anything else. And you can also go up into this development board at the top here, which is a way to get figures out of your bag, so you can improve your bag and also gain resources and things when you play onto that board. So it's pretty straightforward. These event tiles are the game tracker. So once we've been through all 18 event tiles, then the game will end, and we'll do a final scoring and see who wins. In fact, I think all of the points are in-game scoring. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You can actually see the in-game scoring right here next to the events. All of these wooden tokens are all worth a different amount of points based on what they are. Your coins are worth 1 point each. And then you're also going to total up the number of these trading posts you built, the number of these little people tokens you've collected, and you're going to multiply it essentially by how far along this track you made it at the bottom, to the development track along the bottom. So it's interesting, because when I taught it to Michael about 4 years ago, he was much less familiar with games, and I was also less familiar, although, still somewhat familiar. But I had this sort of solidly in the medium weight category in my mind. But teaching it to Michael and Winnie at Airecon now, Michael's way more familiar with games, and Winnie is super familiar with games. So it actually really felt much lighter than I remembered it being. Which was interesting. It was I think it's the first game where I've really revisited a sort of a game like this after a really long period of time. And I thought, oh, this is way lighter than I remember it being. I remember it being much heavier. I mean, and like I said, I never thought this was a heavy game or anything like that. But I just remembered it being sort of solid middleweight. Now I think it's almost lightweight. But maybe it's just because I'm used to mechanisms. Again, like, this is the thing that I'm always trying to remember. Like, I think this is very easy to explain to someone who's very familiar with hobby games or bag building or action selection and stuff like that. Um, but it's kind of also explains our issues with Orleans stories, which is the follow up to Orleans. So Orleans has two expansions. I've got them both. They're fine. They're more event cards, more buildings, things like that. It's good. The event cards are all different decks, so you can swap out the event decks to make them more or less. Uh, Actually, I don't think you can make them less difficult. I think you can only sort of escalate the impact of the events. But there's also a function where there's sort of like an invasion going on and it becomes like cooperative, but I haven't tried that. Um, but in Orleans stories, there's kind of like two big differences. One is that it's like the event tiles are gone and it's more like a narrative thing. So there's like a sort of it's actually narratively driven by these events that are taking place. And this sort of wandering around the Orleans province and collecting tiles is replaced with like a sort of a village building thing where you're building villages and it's like becomes more like a territory control situation. Um, and I remember playing it at Essen, and it took such a long. There was only two stories in the box. One was short, and one was long. And that's what they call them. They call them short and long. So there wasn't like a medium story or anything like that. But I understand they've been releasing expansion packs, which are just additional stories. But to be honest, I'm never going to revisit it because we did the short story. It took such a long time. I think we ended up putting it away before we even finished it because it got to like something like 3 or 4 in the morning, and we're all way too tired. And we've been playing it for too long, and it didn't have the complexity to carry that length. Like the story felt like it was way too long. It needed to be much shorter. Um, the only interesting thing I really have, and so that's what I'm saying. Like maybe Orleans is just way simpler than I remember, and that kind of plays out with this sort of Orleans story being way too long. But I did like the territory control board better than this token collection thing. I actually really wish there was a version of Orleans with the territory control stuff from Orleans stories in it. Or like an expansion with another board, Orleans Wars expansion or something. That'd be really really fun. I like that a lot. It's a shame that you can't import that into this game, which is the right length for the mechanisms. And that's Orleans. It was still great. We all had a great time, and I'd happily play it whenever. I have no complaints about Orleans. And then after Orleans, we're all ready for something a bit crunchier, so we moved on to Spirit Island, which I didn't post any photos of, but I do have some photos of here. And here we all are playing Spirit Island. Michael finds Spirit Island very overwhelming. Um, yeah. He I think the thing about Spirit Island is that it's very cognitive, right? You can see Winnie here has got if you guys know Spirit Island at all, I don't worry, I'll do a bit of an explain in a minute. But for those of you that know, Winnie just said, "Give me the hardest thing." So I gave him Starlight Seeks Its Form, and he actually crushed with it. And he's like, "I never want to play this with any other god." I was like, "You haven't tried any?" He's like, "Yeah, but this is my favorite." And to be fair, I have played with it, and it's really good fun. I was Downpour Drenches the World, which is also quite high complexity, and it's pretty nuts. Um, but yeah, Spirit Island is a game where colonists are coming to take over the island, and you are the gods protecting the island and the Dahan. The Dahan are the little wooden pieces. The colonists are these plastic pieces. And every round, more and more waves of colonists are showing up to the island. And as the gods with the arcane powers, you have to kill the colonists before they pollute the island to the point where it becomes uninhabitable and you die. And you kill them and you also scare them. And at some point, they're so scared and so many of them are dead, they leave. But you only have a certain amount of time to do it, because if this blight, which are the gray tokens, gets too plentiful on the island, they've polluted it and it becomes destroyed, or if you run out of invasion cards, essentially so many invaders have turned up, you also lose the game that way, so there's a timer on it. This is a fully cooperative game. You all play a different god. It's real crunchy. It's a real sort of puzzle. Each turn you're playing these power cards from your hand, and you're sort of managing your little board here, your god board, and you've got powers on your god board as well, and you're basically trying to kill as much white plastic as you can. you've got there's four quarters, one quarter of there's one sort of island tile per player, and to an extent you're sort of dealing you're by no means restricted to your island tile, but to an extent you sort of have to own it because certainly at the beginning of the game anyway, you have very little presence, which is these wooden tokens on your board that you're putting out. Michael's green, Winnie's blue, I'm purple over here, and Fred is red. And so you can see we're sort of spreading out over the island. This might be about halfway through the game. But at the beginning of the game, you're just like in one location. And so you have to sort of spread out in order to target more things. So to an extent, you have to kind of take control of what's going on your island. And it's a real puzzle, and it's very crunchy, and it's very cognitive, and it's a cooperative game where quite often the cooperation sort of devolves to oh, Billy, like I think I love it. I've never played it solo. I've only played it multiplayer. I would play it solo, but I've played it at 2, I've played it at 3, I've played it at 4. I really, really, really like it. You can see I like it because I've got literally everything for it. I backed the first Kickstarter. We covered it ages ago on the channel. I made a horrible mistake in the gameplay videos because it was, at that time, quite a heavy game for me. I mean, that was about 5 years ago now. And to be fair, like, I'd probably tackled heavier games. Like, I definitely tackled heavier games. But never alive on camera during a shoot. And the demands just kind of got to me. And there was some elements I found quite tricky. But now I'm very comfortable teaching this and looking at it. But I think the rules video is correct. The rules video I did for this. I think I sorted out my mistakes. I think the one thing I got wrong in the rules video is the Blight Cascade. I think I explained that slightly poorly. But or slightly incorrectly. But everything else is right, I think. But that was the first Kickstarter, so I was a very early adopter of this, and that was kind of by accident. I just liked the look of it and the cooperative element of it. I didn't know anything about Eric Russ. I didn't know anything about Greater Than Games or anything like that. But I backed every Kickstarter and got everything since as it comes out. I even bought the big wooden crate just to put together. Eddie says the digital version is a good port of the game. Eddie, I haven't bought it. And the reason I haven't bought the digital version is I think there was no multiplayer for a long time. I don't know if they've subsequently released that. There's also none of the expansions. They might have put those out now. But there's also a really good tabletop simulator scripted mod. It's really good. And it's multiplayer and it has all the expansions. But you didn't hear it from me. And if you like it, you should buy the game. I mean, I'm somewhat... I'm simultaneously distraught and excited to learn there's more expansions coming for this because they're not going to fit in the crate. The crate was designed for this content. But it's great. There is many ways to escalate the difficulty as well. You can see here we're playing against the Kingdom of Brandenburg, Prussia. So those are our invaders. These cards here give the invaders different powers. You can play without an adversary, so you're still playing against the invaders. They just don't have any special powers. That's sort of the basic way to play. And then all the different spirits have different levels of complexity. So Michael's got a low complexity spirit here, and Dan has the most complex one in the game. I've got one that's pretty high complexity too. It's actually a really odd spirit. For those of you that know how to play the game, it kind of plays like just 1 or 2 cards. And then it can repeat those cards like 3 or 4 times. So you kind of have to build a hand of powers around cards that are like, can be successful by repeating the same thing over and over again. It's called Downpour Drenches the World, and it's really interesting because you're kind of just raining down the same card over and over again. But you need to unlock water symbols to do that. It's crazy. But yeah, the game is great. All the gods are very, very asymmetrical, or the spirits of the Spirit Island are very asymmetrical. And yep, it escalates really well. The core game is great. The first expansion, Branch and Claw, adds a bunch of extra mechanisms which are really fun as well. I think that Branch and Claw feels... They were both released in the first Kickstarter. I think Branch and Claw... I think there's only been 2, actually. 2 Kickstarters. I think it was the first Kickstarter, and then there might have been a reprint Kickstarter. Not sure. And then there was the Jagged Earth Kickstarter. But Branch and Claw feels kind of like it was designed with the core set. Um, Although, weirdly, I didn't buy it at the time. Uh, uh, yeah, there's more. I've heard that Eric Ross is working on the next expansion for this, which is great because, yeah, I mean, all of his stuff feels sort of very tightly balanced and escalates really well. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoy Spirit Island. Although the one thing I would say is it kind of gets around, and I've heard this communicated as a compliment to the competitive element of the game, which is that like I was sort of pointing out earlier, these sort of the different little islands that you're all playing on, and to an extent, you kind of have to control your own island, and a lot of the cooperation kind of works out like, I have the power to make someone's powers fast this round. Does anyone need that? Or I can give someone a water element. Does anyone need that? Or I can put out a disease token. Where does anyone need that? Or I can get rid of a blight somewhere. Is anyone worried about something? So like to an extent, you're kind of in charge of your section of the board, and you kind of have to sort of manage that. And then if you can sort of do anything tangential with the cards you're playing this round, you're sort of like selling them to the other players at the table. But because the puzzle is so crunchy, it's very hard to sort of manage multiple things at once. Now, Winnie is some kind of savant because he's never played the game before and he just decided to tackle the hardest spirit, and then he was also helping Michael out the whole time. And I would find that very difficult. Like that's too much for me. Like I want to just focus. I need to focus on what I'm doing, particularly with this god. And I have played that spirit as well, and I've very much enjoyed it. I do enjoy escalating the crunch, but I need to be focused on what I'm doing because if I start getting too distracted, I sort of forget what I was doing, and then I mess up, and the invaders come and they make everything bad. And so, to that extent, I think that that's the one thing Michael finds off-putting about the game, which I think is worth mentioning. If this is something that appeals to you, is that the cooperative nature is not necessarily the most collaborative. To an extent, it's very much sort of about relying on people to sort of hold up their side of the table and then also throwing people a bone when you can. That's not to say that you can't lean over the table and help them out, but it requires someone with a lot of mental capacity to do that. I think with a lot of cognitive capacity to do that without dropping the ball on their side of the table. And to be fair, when he was doing a great job, but there's also a situation, you can't really see it, but up here on his coast, where he kind of pushed all the invaders off of his island, which is great, because they're not destroying the island then, into one territory on the coast where he couldn't get rid of them. There were so many in this one space, and eventually I had to get a major power called like Tsunami or something and just come in and wash them all away, which worked great for me because I was the downpour drenches the world, I was the god of water, so that was good. But it can feel quite overwhelming, and I think it's obviously a great game for if you've got like someone who's sort of a bit of an alpha gamer in your team, because they really can't alpha game. Like I mean they can try, but they'll probably get tired of it pretty quickly and just like it's a game where you're relying on people to sort of support the team. I think Michael feels a little lost at sea sometimes, and I think that's entirely understandable with this game. And so that's something I guess I would caution you of if you're thinking about investing. Having said that, the core set I think is not super expensive, and there's a huge amount of game just in the core set. You can scale up just like with for science, you can scale up the difficulty in a very modular way, and you can make it as hard as you want. And I've never played it. I've never played it on easy mode and not had a good time. And I'm always keen to just ratchet up the difficulty and try and make it harder. Um, Billy says, "So if I suck and screw up, we lose." Well, not necessarily, Billy. There are degrees of success. Like it depends on what kind. But yeah, yeah. Basically, come on, don't let the team down. There's an element of that, but there's also like you don't need to like you can sort of hold your own to an extent, and then as other people become, generally if your friends are doing quite well or they're being quite successful, you may well win before you screw up bad enough to lose. It also depends on what difficulty you're playing on and which invaders you're dealing with. um, but there are ways to mitigate this somewhat. Like you can give someone a really low complexity spirit. Jagged Earth actually comes with adjusters to make the complexity spirits even simpler, but to an extent. Like you're all drawing powers from the same two decks of minor and major powers, um, which are all roughly the same complexity, and so you still kind of need to be able to deal with those cards. Um, and it's yeah, it's almost like you're all kind of you've all kind of got a part of the puzzle that you have to deal with, you know. And but to be fair, Michael was really getting the hang of it by the end of the game. You know, he I don't know if he necessarily ever relaxed and felt comfortable with it, but he certainly did well and got the hang of it. So you know, um, so yeah, Spirit Island. It's one of my top games. I have all the stuff written and happily play it every time. And I was super stoked. I mean, a lot of the games we played at Airecon this year are just kind of games that I'm a really big fan of. So it was great. I just brought all my favorite games, I guess. Well, not Cthulhu Wars and Wonderland's War. Those were gambles. And not June Imperium either. Like so maybe I did bring all my favorite games. I don't know. This is definitely actually early on I brought for Michael. I just brought games that people were really enthusiastic to play, and so I had a great time. You know, like Fred really wanted to play Cthulhu Wars, as did I. Michael really wanted to play Orleans, and he really wanted to play Regicide. So we just had a great time, you know. We've got one more game to mention on the Sunday, which you guys can see here. Just to come back to the honorable mentions, I brought Brian Baru and The Great Zimbabwe because Fred and I were both interested in playing both of those. But I really was hoping to find someone to teach us The Great Zimbabwe, and there was no one there who knew how to play it. So if you're going to Airecon next year and you know how to play Great Zimbabwe, I'll bring it again. It's not a big box, and you can teach it, and we'll all play it. That'd be great. Thank you. Um, and Brian Baru I brought because I didn't think it was too long. Fred was interested in playing it, and it's the review copy I got from Osprey Games, so I really wanted to play it, but unfortunately it just didn't get to the table. Again, the thing is, all of these games are games that someone knew how to play, so we could just kind of get started right away with. I did say, actually, when I showed up at the convention, I was like, I really don't want to teach anything. I kind of just want to get talk games, because it's so nice and relaxing for me to get talk games. I do a lot of teaching. I still wound up teaching practically all of these. So, like, I didn't teach Cthulhu Wars, and I actually didn't have to teach El Grande, because there was another chap there who knew how to play it, which was great. And that's the honorable mentions. So then on Sunday we played the El Grande Big Box, aka the Big Box, and El Grande I think is sort of infamous now as a territory control classic. You know, I think most reviewers talk about it very fondly. It is a game that I think is best with 5. In fact, I don't think I've actually played it with less than 4, or fewer than 4. I know you need at least 3 anyway, but I don't think I've ever actually even played it with 3. But I had, yeah, they're the photos of El Grande. I do, so we were joined once again by Winnie, and also a chap next to him that I'm going to call Wargamer. And Wargamer knew the game, the core game, very well. So he'd played the original game a lot, and so he was able to teach that. My set is the big box version. I did originally have the original version, so I've got the wooden tower and the little guy here. And I kept all the original cubes as well, if you prefer the cubes. But this is the 2015 reprint of the core game with all the expansions. So the big box is just everything that they ever printed for it in one big box. They did it for the 20th anniversary in 2015. And I guess people are kind of hoping that they're going to reprint it again at the next anniversary. Fingers crossed. But we'll have to see, because it's ridiculously hard to get hold of. Fred played it. We played it, and Fred really wanted to get a copy, and he couldn't find a copy, and he was upset. He could find, you can, if you want the core game, just the original game in German, it's very easy to find. Apparently it's also quite easy to find in Danish, and you can find French copies, and Fred is French, but he said he'd mostly be playing with English people, and so you have to get an English copy. And even the copy that Wargamer was playing with was actually a German copy with translations in the card sleeves. So it's pretty difficult to find, which is deeply unfortunate because it's very good. It's a territory control game, but it's also got Euro sensibilities, and I've played this both with groups that are like this group here, very political, or make it very political. So there's a lot of scope for negotiations and table talk, but also you can play with people that are much more Eurogame minded, and there'll be almost none of that. So it kind of lends itself to both groups, which makes it very versatile. Um, it's a super sort of simple game. We're actually playing with some of the I say it's super simple. I mean, it's pretty simple, and then gets a little more complicated from there, really. But basically, you got the board here. You got all the territories on the board, and the territories have three values here, which are the points that they're worth. And there's 9 rounds in the game, so you're going to tick down the 9 rounds here. And every time you get to one of these red fleur-de-lis, you're going to go over here and do a scoring round. The scoring round is do a castle thing, and then just go through all the territories in order and score them. And when you score a territory, it's quite simple, really. The person with the most people gets the most points, and then second place gets that one, and third place gets the third value, if there is one. Some don't have a value, like Portugal here, which is not from the core game, but I can mention the expansions we played with in a minute, if you like. But what's interesting about the game is sort of twofold, right? You got this marketplace of cards on the right, and the cards are going to determine what you do in a round. So there's 2 phases to each round, basically. The first phase is everyone bids, and then the second phase is everyone gets a card and carries out the actions on that card. And Michael won this game, Difter. Michael won this game because he's an incredible strategist. No, I mean, to be fair, Michael was doing very well throughout this whole game, and then right at the end, I thought I sort of got a comeback move, but Winnie was way ahead for most of it, and so Winnie, I had to, do you know, I'll get into the minutia. Let me finish doing the rules overview real quick though, because basically, what's really interesting about the game is you got this deck of cards numbered 1 to 13, right? This is in the core game. The expansions do a lot to shake these things up. But in the core game, you've got a deck of cards numbered 1 to 13. And in the bidding phase, you're going to play one of these cards. And that's going to determine turn order for the drafting of the action cards. But the bidding cards, and you can see the 5 down here with a bunch of guys on it, also determine how many soldiers you get into your court. So you've got, you can see I've put green soldiers here in a bowl. We've all got a bowl full of caballeros, Spanish soldiers, and they're in what's called the province, and it's a little like Hansa, where you have to get them out of the province into the court, and then from the court they can be deployed onto the board. So there's sort of a 2-step process here, and they come from the province into the court by the playing of these cards. So the 1 gets you the most guys from your province into your court, but it also means you're going to be picking your action card last. The 13 lets you pick the action card first, but it doesn't give you any guys from the province at all. So you're going to have fewer guys to deploy, if any at all. And you're going to play 1 card every round in all 9 rounds. So you're going to play 9 of the 13 cards, and you never pick them back up. So once it's gone, it's gone. And that's kind of the tightness of the core game that people really, really like. Additionally, and you can see here we've got actually a market row of 7 cards, one of which is being picked up by Fred here. But in the core game, you'll only play with 5 cards, which means that in a 5-player game, if you're the last person picking up a card, then too bad. You are going to have whatever's left. But what's interesting as well about the bidding round is it's not like a secret bid or anything like that. Whoever plays first just plays a card face up, and then everybody else plays a card in turn order from them, which is just clockwise around the table. But you can't play the same number that person just played. So if you play your 13, you're definitely getting first choice of action card. And if you play your 1, you're definitely going last and getting the most soldiers. And because nobody else can play their 1, right? And the 1 and the 13 are the most powerful cards or the most impactful cards in the game, so you really want to save them for something important. But then you might get a really good action card that comes out that you really want to grab. It could be really good in that situation at that moment, or perhaps it's just very powerful. So there's all these different things influencing it that make it really tight. Michael won, yay! Michael did win, and So the action cards, I won't explain them all, but they kind of have two functions. They have a special power in the middle of the card, and also a power at the bottom of the card. The power at the bottom is just how many dudes you can put from your court into territories on the board. And when you're putting dudes into territories, they have to go in territories adjacent to the king, who's the big black piece here, but not into the territory of the king. So currently, you can put troops into Galicia, Castilla de Valle, and Aragon, and that's it. So what you can do is take this card on the right here that lets you move the king, but only one person can move him per round, and they decide where the king goes. Optimistically cynical. That's. I don't understand. I'm trying to. Is that a joke? Oh, I get it. Okay, yeah. You really derailed me there for a minute. I was like, oh no! That'd be the worst possible time for that. Thank you. Anyway, so that's the core of El Grande. 3 scoring rounds. And I mentioned you can only deploy in the regions adjacent to the king. You can always drop your caballeros into the Castillo, which is the tower. The tower is also scored in the same way as the regions, with first, second, and third place. But of course, the caballeros, the soldiers in the tower, are hidden. So you have to try and remember who's put in how many. But there's an additional function. You see, at the beginning of the scoring round, you remove the castle to reveal all the... Actually, before you remove... Is it before? Yes, before you remove the castle, everyone locks a region into the dial that they have. And then you reveal the castle, you score the castle, and everyone takes their caballeros that were in the Castillo and puts them into the region they dialed in. And you can go into any region except the region where the king is. Nobody can play into the king's region ever, no matter what. So it's really interesting so there's this kind of like surprise upset at the beginning of the scoring round every time. Vladimir Blinsky says, reminds me a bit of The King is Dead. Quite possibly. This is a Wolfgang Kramer design, and that's Pierre Sylvester. I haven't actually played The King is Dead, so I don't know. I'd like to. I don't know. So I'll have to give it a shot. If it's similar to El Grande, I'll probably like it a lot. You can add an insane amount of expansions if you have the big box as well, that just kind of make everything more. I gave Winnie the expansion book, and they said we can incorporate anything you want so long as you're willing to read it and teach it. He hadn't played before, but he picked up the core game pretty quickly, and he added in a few small expansions. So I think the other expansions were a lot even for him. So to sort of assimilate and implement real quick. But there is one card in here. 2 cards actually that are the same, called the veto card. And the veto card essentially lets you veto someone else's action. So they try to play a card and you're like, nope, it's a nope card. And it often winds up being a negotiation. And going into the final round, Winnie was way ahead, and he wanted to move the king in a way that would pretty much assure him victory. So I went to veto the king, which meant it didn't move because I had the veto card, and we were both, I think, probably annoyed with one another to the with one another sort of maneuvers, because I'd basically been harassing him for a whole round and saying to the whole table, like, get Winnie, he's gonna win, obviously get the leader, and everyone else was just kind of doing their own thing. And I was like, Fred was just trying to shore up points, as was Wargamer, and Michael, I don't know what Michael was doing. But basically, by vetoing the king's movement, the king then remained in Michael's capital province here, which netted Michael a bunch of points. And Michael was solidly in second place at that point. And if I thought about it, Winnie and I probably should have negotiated and put where I don't play the veto, and I say, if you put the king in your home province, which is the middle here, I'm gonna veto it. So put it somewhere else, and then maybe Winnie could have put it somewhere sort of less impactful, because by vetoing it, I basically gave Michael a ton of points, and that was also not in Winnie's interest. So that's a good example of where the table talk of El Grande can become a big deal, because we were both, I think, not in the right mindset to negotiate. And that we weren't cross with each other or anything like that, but we'd been trash talking and beating up on each other and sort of going back and forth for a round, and we were just kind of like, no, just let me have the points, or I've got to stop you. And so we were, but if we thought about it for a moment, we probably should have negotiated and come to an arrangement where we put the king in like one of Paul or Fred's provinces, because they were both behind at that point. But the table talk, it can be significant or it can be completely non-present, depending on the group you're playing with and how you sort of want to approach it. But even though there was quite a lot of table talk in this, and at one point, like, Michael's sort of delay was driving Fred nuts. He was so agitated. It was hilarious. He was getting up, he was pacing around, shaking the chair like, make a move! It was such fun. It was great. It was exactly what I wanted from El Grande. It was so much fun, and Michael, who's not normally into these kinds of games, he thoroughly enjoyed it as well, and he reassures me it's nothing to do with the fact he won. So, unfortunately, you can't buy it. It's a real bummer. But they reprinted it, the 20th anniversary edition in 2015. So maybe 30th anniversary edition in a couple years? Fingers crossed. Z-Man Games, come on. Everyone wants to buy it. Let's go. Reprint. Hager says, I've got a promo for The King is Dead, and I need to get it to the table. Well, Haggers, bring it to UKG. We'll have a game. Happily play it. Okay, so I think that wraps up my Airecon list. We talked about everything. Oh yeah, I was just going to mention real quick, for those of you who are interested in the El Grande, if you've got it, a copy, and you haven't broken into the big box expansions. We played with boats, which is a secondary court where you can assign soldiers and they can come from the court into the dock territories around the board. So it sort of breaks the rule of you have to be adjacent to the king when you place them. But you have to put people down into the boat, and then other people can take the boat away from you, and then they control that court. It's interesting. We barely used it all that much. Fred used it for like one guy, but it had quite an impact, or it netted him some points. We played with the prison, which is a similar thing. It's like a bonus action. You can take someone's caballero off the board, put it in prison, and then whoever moves the king can choose to release everyone from prison and decide where to put them all. Again, they can come from anywhere, but they all have to go to the same territory once they're being released. And we played with 2 extra decks of cards. So we played with the 6 stack, which are kind of anarchic cards. Winnie told me after the game that actually you're supposed to do sort of like a draft where everyone picks what cards are going into that deck. But because none of us had seen it before, he decided to just randomize it. Which is fair enough. And I liked it. It made the game... And then there's the 7th card as well, which actually, when you take it, it lets you deploy up to 3 soldiers, and you can also take 2 roles. You can either take the Jester or the Queen, and the Jester lets you give one of your caballeros to another player, and they have to deploy it as one of their deployments, so it sort of hinders their deployment and also gets you extra caballeros on the board. And then the Queen either lets you take 1 additional caballero from your province to your court, or put 1 out from your court onto the board on your turn. So it's like an additional deployment, but it gives you either step. And you get to take 1 of those when you take the 7th card. So you can either take them from someone that's got them, or take them from the board if they haven't been used yet. I liked it. Overall, I liked the expansions. I do think the 6th and 7th card made the game longer because there were more cards to read, but it also felt less bad if you're the last player because there was still some choice. There was 3 cards left where before there had been just 1. There was still not like a great amount of choices. It didn't feel like it diluted impact of being last too much. It didn't like make being last like just unimportant. All the cards still felt very good, and people were still like playing their 13s and their 12s to try and get the really good cards. So, but it did make the game somewhat longer. But I really liked it. I like those expenses, and we added in Portugal, which is just another territory. Except because it doesn't appear on the dial, it can never be impacted by the dials. So the only way to like sort of get in there really is by moving the king nearby. I think the king can go to Portugal as well. That's fine, and of course it's only worth 5 points, and it's scored last. And there's some various other tokens around the board which were just used for the deck, the sixth card deck. But we didn't see all of them. Like these tokens down here, we didn't even use because they didn't come up. But we did get the High Inquisitor. That's what the two black meeples are. So they're like they started off in Sevilla. That was randomized, and they contribute to the scoring. So blue is, for example, now in second place, where they would be in first if the High Inquisitor's meeples weren't in the game. But there is a card in the sixth deck that lets you become the High Inquisitor, and on your turn, once per round, you can actually move the meeples, and you can be the High Inquisitor until the next scoring round. And when you move the black meeples, they also arrest a meeple and take them with them, so you can kind of move people around the territories. It's just pretty funny. But these were the very light expansions. This is barely even scratching the surface of what's in the big box. The main one being the cards that alter the 13 card deck, adding asymmetrical powers in and increasing the numbers to much higher, where you have to like build the deck before the game. So everyone's kind of secretly picking powers to bring to the game, which is pretty nuts. I've never played with it, but I'd really like to. All right, that's it for the Airecon rundown. I hope you've enjoyed the Airecon rundown. I'm not going to do the Kickstarter commentary because it's been almost 3 hours. And I feel like it'd be kind of mean to just summarize these things in one line. You know, like a bit too succinct. It might seem too dismissive. I'm not being entirely positive. I'll tell you one thing I will do actually, real quick, is I'll just mention this one, because I think this is really just here as a heads up, more than anything. So, in case you didn't see it, there is, in fact... Oh, we got a short section at the end here, Difter. I'm not signing off just yet. But this is Rook City Renegades. It's a new expansion for the Sentinels of the Multiverse. So if you don't know about this, Sentinels of the Multiverse, Greater Than Games, the same publisher as Spirit Island, although this is not designed by Airecon. I actually don't know who the designer of Sentinels of the Multiverse is, but they recently did a Kickstarter for the Definitive Edition, which is the big box that contains all the stuff they've ever put out for it, with new art in a single box. And then Rook City Renegades is the first expansion for it. I guess they're a take on the Defenders. No, not the Defenders. I mean, are they actually called the Renegades? You know, Ghost Rider and Moon Knight and that lot. Anyway, the point is that this is clearly Ghost Rider, and I think he's in a superhero team called the Renegades. So I think this is probably inspired by that somewhat. And Luke Cage is on that team as well, I think. He's also on the Defenders, but anyway, that guy kind of looks like he could be Luke Cage-esque. But anyway, this is available now if you were ever tempted by Sentinels of the Multiverse. A lot of people I know really like Sentinels of the Multiverse. I've only played it one time when it first came out, and I had a real bad experience with it. So I don't really know how I feel about it. I'm really interested in trying it some more because I've heard so many positive things about it. But I don't know, there's so many games to get to, and I just don't know if I'm particularly inclined to spend the money to get this one. I mean, I think that can you get the... I mean, you could, for like $70, get the Definitive Edition, which would be like almost more content than you probably ever need for this. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know. I've only played the core set, the very original core set that came out. Like I said, I had a bad time with it, so I haven't really looked at it further, but lots of people I know are very complimentary about the game, and everyone thinks I should try it again. So, heads up, this is on Kickstarter right now if you're at all interested in it. Eddie says, this looks like a take of the Marvel group, the Defenders, that Ghost Rider and Luke Cage were members of at one point. Yeah, the Defenders. Okay, is it the Defenders? I thought I didn't know Ghost Rider was in the Defenders. I thought maybe there was another group as well, like the Renegades or something that Ghost Rider was in. Or was it the I don't know. Anyway, there we go. So that's my heads up. That's on Kickstarter now, and if you were keen to get involved in Sentinels of the Multiverse, this is probably a pretty good way to do it, I guess. I don't actually know if the definitive edition is seeing a retail release or not. Sorry, I don't know that. So there we go. Now I'm just going to do the Q&A. I've got 2 questions here. One is from Heggers. Actually, I'll do Heggers first. He asked, so this is just, I asked the Patreon post, is there anything you guys would like me to talk about in the next chatting episode? And I got a couple of questions back, and Hager says, how about a round of Desert Island board games? Which sounds suspiciously like, what is your top 10 games? And something I've sort of avoided doing, and it's the reason basically is that there was, it's kind of the same reason why, like, for example, Orleans is a great example of a game that I find thoroughly enjoyable, but I find it so much more enjoyable because Michael really likes it. It's so difficult, sort of like, Desert Island games, all my Desert Island games are going to be crunchy solo games, like Gloomhaven solo, or Too Many Bones, because on a desert, no one who's playing with me on a desert island, nobody, right? And I think that, it's about how it's such a social hobby, and the best game to play is the one that everyone's excited about, and not because you convinced them they should be, right? Like, you kind of need people to sort of be interested in playing and motivated to play on their own. Like, to an extent, you can convince people to play something. Particularly, the more into the hobby they are, I think, the more scope there is to sort of say, well, you should try this, right? Or, I think this might be something you like. But, you have to be aware of their tastes and things like that. It's very rare to come across a game that is sort of flawlessly sellable. And I think that's why Ark Nova is so popular, right? Like, I don't think there's nothing in Ark Nova that makes me massively excited, but it's entirely pleasing and it's got a good sort of pace to it. I think the scoring's a bit wacky, given that it doesn't necessarily reflect. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell who's done well in the game. I guess just keeping up with the race is doing well, but I think there's also scope to get a lot of points in sort of in ways that are maybe not necessarily the most difficult or engage the most with the game's mechanisms. But, Ark Nova's one you could bring to the table, and to a table of hobby gamers, and probably the only complaints you'd have are the kind of people who, like, exclusively want to play the Resistance Avalon or, Cthulhu Wars. And by Cthulhu Wars, I mean any war game where you fight other people in territories. Dudes on a map games, I guess. So, like, like Spirit Island is a game that I absolutely adore. It's definitely one of my top games. I'm happy to play it any time, and I also think it's quite appealing because it's cooperative and it scales difficulty very well. It's an easy game to curate. But again, I brought it because Fred was really excited about it. We played it once, and Winnie had never played it before, and he was like, I love this game, sell it to me. I want to buy this copy from you right now. But Michael's not, Michael will do it, but it's not his first choice. Certainly, not for co-op. Like, Michael likes the really collaborative ones. He likes the Mansions of Madness, where we're sort of sitting around chatting about all the moves and stuff like that. And a lot of the enjoyment comes from sort of collaboration and then chagrin as everything goes wrong in the Mythos phase. Communal chagrin. But yeah, so it's really hard to sort of say Haggers. Personally, I'm always a big fan of sort of political games. I like it when there's a lot of interaction. I like it when there's a lot of shouting. Wonderland's War is right up my street with a push your luck gambling element. that is also tied into politics. But you know, I also really like Euro games and stuff like that. But you have to have the right group for that as well. Like, you know, um, it's, you know, you really do have to have the right group for those kinds of games, because you know, you need to be able to trash talk and be a bit silly and, you know, have fun with them. Um, and sometimes people can feel quite sort of like put upon, you know, and that's a shame. Um, Billy says, I like to be on a team too, which is why I enjoy Journeys in Middle Earth. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Billy, but I just don't understand the second part where you say enjoy Journeys in Middle Earth. I played a lot of it on the channel here, so if you want to know more about this statement, check out any of my playthroughs. I do enjoy live streaming it a lot. Just having a quick look through the comments here, because I think I said I was going to address someone's comment at the end here as well, but I've also got, I don't know, I don't think that really was what you were looking for, Haggers, with your question, like Desert Island board games, but like, you know, the thing is, the right group with the wrong game is way better than a good game with the wrong group. Like, yeah, a good group with a bad game is better than is much better than a good game with a bad group. Like, the people are so important. And then, generally speaking, I don't think there's like bad groups. It's to an extent, it's about matching interests and sensibilities with the right experience, you know, and that's largely what we do here. We sort of curate the games collection. That's why I have such a large collection, you know, because it's about the right games for the right moments, finding those. And people will surprise you as well, you know, like I played Black Rose Wars with a group who are not experienced gamers, hobby gamers necessarily. Like, some of them are reasonably experienced, but not anything like as crunchy as Black Rose Wars. We had an absolute blast, and they did really, really well at it. I like Black Rose Wars a lot. But these are just sliding off the top of my head, you know. I'll tell you, like, a game, a good, I guess, example of Desert Island game, which is, I guess, like a game I really like, but is like Guards of Atlantis 2, right? Because it's so hard to get to the table. Like, Guards of Atlantis 2 is, I mean, it's Michael's nightmare game. We tried to play it with Michael, and he really didn't have a good time, because it's a game that's, again, like, it's a 4-player game. I mean, you can play 6, I think you can play 8, but you played it 4. And it's 2 against 2, and you can talk openly in the game, but realistically, if you do talk openly, then your opponents will hear what you're saying, and they'll just counter what you're doing. So for those of you that don't know, it's a MOBA-style game. I did a rules video for their Kickstarter campaign, actually, which is up on the channel, I think. We're going to do a playthrough of it as well, but unfortunately the pandemic happened. This was right around the time of the pandemic, and they sent me this beautiful prototype. I really wanted to do this 4-player game, but anyway, I mean, the thing is, like, it's actually the same issue Michael has with Spirit Island to an extent, which is that, you know, you've got to play well. There's enormous pressure to play well, or you'll let the team down. But in Spirit Island, it's hard to talk to other people, but you can. Like, ultimately you can. And especially if you're not playing it in a rush, right? Like, you know, you got all the time in the world. You can sort of plan out your whole thing, and then go and talk to someone else about their plan. Of course, then you have to remember what you were doing, and that can be difficult. But in Guards of Atlantis, you can't really talk openly, because you'll give away your plan to the other team, and then they'll just counter what you're doing. So it's a MOBA style game where you've both got heroes, and then there's 2 armies clashing across the board, and each one of your heroes is going out on the board and killing each other, and it's pretty vicious. Like, you know, you really have to sort of work hard and come up with a good plan to do well, and you can't really talk about the plans. You just kind of need to rely on people to do well, or sort of like understand what you might be doing, and understand sort of what the information you've put out to the game. You really need to grab the sort of the nuances and you can't really, I mean, the thing is, like, you can just fail, right? Like, it's absolutely, like, that's how your first games of it are going to go anyway. You're just going to be failing horribly, and you have to try not to worry too much about that, because that's how you learn to get better. But you know, you have to commit to getting good at it then, and in order to start really enjoying it. So it's a big ask. It's like 2 people, 2 teams of 2, very confrontational, and you can't collaborate really effectively, and you have to commit to getting good at it and understanding the characters, and there's a lot of characters. So it's nigh on impossible to get to the table unless you have a group of 4 people who are really, really dedicated to wanting to do it. And it's a shame because it's a really good game, but you need a really specific group. So I rarely recommend it to anyone to buy, because if you don't have that group, then you're just not going to get anything out of it. So that's, I guess, a desert island game. In a fictional world where I can pick any game I want and then have the perfect group for it, that would be one of them. But it just doesn't happen. Like, I mean, you don't get a fictional world where you can have a perfect group all the time. Eddie says, it's really hard to get my group to try different games. The Betrayal games, Axis and Allies, and the various versions of Zombicide appeal to them the most. That's fair enough. It is hard to get people to try different games, Eddie, and it's a lot of pressure as well if you're the one bringing it to the table to, you know, be able to effectively teach it, especially if you've been selling it, you know. Like, there's also, like, some people have this attitude where if you're selling it really hard to them and you're like, no, you'll like this, it's great, trust me, then they start out, like, on the defensive. Like, it's some people are like, okay, great, if you're recommending this, I'm so excited to try it. And some people, it immediately puts them on the back foot and they're like, no, you know, I'm not gonna like this and I can't be convinced otherwise. And then you play it, and even if they did like it, they're still like, it was okay. You know, grouchy people. I hope you don't have any of those in your group. To be fair, it's not someone I've come across a lot lately, you know, or at all. But I do remember certainly as kids that happened a lot more often. But yeah, you know, to an extent, it's like it is tricky to convince people to play these other games, and harder still to discern whether or not they're good. It's hard to pick a game and know whether or not it's going to go down well with a group, you know. A few times I've brought a game to the table and I've been very excited and I'm like, this is going to be great, and then they've all pointed out something that I missed, and they're like, well, this is clearly the best strategy, or this is, like, functionally not good, and I'm like, oh no, they're right, and I missed it, and I was the one that advocated for this. But, you know, you have to be willing to make those mistakes sometimes, or else just never play a new game. That's not feasible. And he says, Deep Madness bombed the hardest with my group. I was so sure they would like the theme. So is it the theme they didn't like, or is it just not, like, is the rule set just a bit clunky? That's a sort of a cooperative dungeon crawler, right? It's not one versus many, I don't think. What I know of it, it just looked like sort of a dungeon crawler under the ocean, possibly with sanity mechanisms or something. I didn't really look at it too much because typically, like, if I get into these sort of cooperative dungeon crawlery type things, I tend to get the fantasy ones because I like that theme the most. But it's also like Eddie says it was a combination of both. Oh, do you know what's not on the Kickstarter commentary list? But I'll give you guys a head up. I couldn't believe this when I saw it, actually. I'll do it in a minute. Eddie says it's a combination of both. It is a co-op. And do you think it's good? Like, do you think the this what's it sort of co-op like? Is it, you know, like a Zombicide, or is it more like I don't know? Like, is it much heavier than that? Like, is it like a sword and sorcery, super heavy? I was going to show you guys this actually. Let me just see if I can find it. Did I save it somewhere? This is just a quick heads up. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because, like I said, we're a little short of time. I want to get this I just wanted to chat a bit at the end, really. But Eddie says, fantasy theme one works best with my group. It's heavier. So what did they object to about it? I can't find this game. I wanted to show you guys in Kickstarter. I can't find it. It's gone. I can't spell it either, so I don't know how to search for it. Because the name is hard to spell, even though it's short and quite simple. Maybe it's on BGA. Active Kickstarters. Here? No, I guess they didn't pay for the sponsorship. Oh, there it is. And he says, I think it wasn't popcorned enough, if that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, some people just really like popcorny games and they don't want to think too much. Like, that's completely relatable. Like, some people, they have a really tough day job or very, they're very cognitive, and when they play board games, they just want to roll dice and laugh. And, that's completely fine. Like, I think it's even, wrong to sort of say that it, to say it's fine almost implies that it might not be fine. Sometimes I'm in that mood. Like, I just want to roll dice. And that's when I break out Dice Throw, which is almost a little too cognitive even for when I really want to goof off. Dice Throw and Mansions of Madness are my kind of go-to popcorn games, depending on the situation. Although Mansions has become a bit too long for that. But yeah, sometimes I just want to throw dice and not have to think too hard. Actually, Journeys to Middle-earth is another one that I go to when I just kind of want to let the game do the heavy lifting. But maybe that's why I'm so bad at it. Anyway, I was going to show you guys this one, just real quick. I know I wasn't going to do much Kickstarter commentary, but this one I hadn't even put on my list here because I forgot it was live. But this is Malahia Lands of Legends, and the reason I wanted to talk about this one real quick is because we played it at Essen. So I mean, this look the last Essen spiel, and this looks a lot like the kind of game I'd be super into. So it's got like 2,300 backers already, and it's a fantasy adventure game, and it's got all this cool fantasy art, and it's by La Botte de Jeu, who are like a known sort of publisher. They might even be one of the Hachette groups. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But they did It's a Wonderful World. They did Netatanka, which we played on the show. That was actually a review copy they gave us, and they never gave us another review copy after that. We didn't think much of Netatanka. And he says, it's weird that Deep Madness was too heavy for them, considering Twilight Imperium, Chaos in the Old World, and Axis and Allies appeal to them. Well, those are all competitive games. Sometimes there's the thing, like, where people, they don't feel the need to, like, when they play something cooperative, they want to play something much lighter. It might be that pressure of letting the group down. It might just be this sort of, like, in a competitive game, it can feel like a real bummer when something goes wrong, like some random RNG goes against your favor. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think you can come to a place where you're happy because everyone else loves it when RNG punishes you in a competitive game, unless you're currently losing, in which case it's just a bummer. But in a cooperative game, whenever something bad happens, it's kind of like a collective sort of blow, and everyone's like, oh, you know, together, and so it's kind of like sometimes it's nice to just kind of relax and enjoy that kind of those kinds of setbacks and things like that. It's just much more relaxing. Whereas, you know, like something like Gloomhaven makes you work real hard, and then that kind of stuff can still happen. Not to the same extent in Gloomhaven, for example, but, you know, watch my playthrough of Swords and Sorceries Ancient Chronicles. I really want to go back to it, but like that first dungeon was so, like, it's so much work to play that game, and I got so outrageously unlucky. And I mean, that's just kind of what that game is. It's just like super crunchy dungeon crawler stuff. But I mean, it didn't really put me off of it, but also like I don't know, like I guess I wouldn't recommend Sword and Sorcery to anyone solo. Like, it's too much for me to remember all the rules on my own. I mostly like, lucky I'm streaming it. I've got chat to help me out. It feels like too much work, Sword and Sorcery, I think. But it, like, I did enjoy it, and I do kind of want to go back to it, but I kind of wish I was playing it with other people. Anyway, this one, speaking of too much work, here's my another flawless segue, Brian. This is this game. Look at that big dragon. That was so cool. They didn't have that at Essen. There's a region map here which you'll explore, and you've got a hero board here with your inventory and all your bits on it. And then you're going to go into the cities, and you're going to have narrative encounters in the cities. They might send you out on missions where you'll have outdoor bits, where you'll sneak up on guards and things, and then you might go into dungeons. Basically, we were taught this game for like 2.5 hours, and we didn't even see everything in the game, and we never really got to play. Like, we had sort of, we made some narrative choices, and every time we thought she'd covered the teacher, we thought she covered everything in the game, she just revealed like a whole new game mode. So it's like there are so many game modes, and they all kind of interlink, but they're all completely like different rule sets. Like, we didn't even learn how to do the dungeons because we were still learning about line of sight for the above ground stuff. Like, it was honestly, there's 4 designers on this. They're all first time designers, and it was like nobody said, it's like they all decided to design a game. They're like, you design the above ground stuff, you design the narrative city stuff, I'm going to design the overworld exploration, and then you design the sort of above ground exploration before you go into the dungeon. And they all designed a completely separate thing, and then just kind of put them all together into this one thing. And oh my god, it was like, I mean, it made Sword and Sorcery look positively approachable. So basically what I'm saying is probably don't back this. Unless they've massively fixed it since we played it at tried to learn it at Essen. But like, we all walked away from this and we were just like, we couldn't believe. We're like, so this is still like massively in development, right? And then we turned around and it's like, coming to Kickstarter, March 2022. And we're like, oh dear. Anyway, yeah, I think this looks great. On paper, it's great. It's super appealing to me. I saw it, and I really wanted to stop by and play it, and I'm so glad I did because I don't want to touch it. Like, I remember like the sort of the individual bits being completely fine in terms of like sort of at least, you know, roughly fine. But I mean, even the teacher was kind of struggling to teach it and internalize it all, and I don't think it's anything to do with her fault. But like, it was just like, oh god, if they couldn't pay me enough money, I wouldn't have time. I'd be like, okay, you guys need to pay me full time for a year to work on this video. And even then, I'm not convinced I'll have it done. So, yeah, like basically, this is my heads up. If you're the kind of person that likes to pull the trigger on the odd fantasy adventure game, like me, even against your better judgment on Kickstarter, maybe not this one. Which is a shame because it looks really neat. This art looks awesome. Like, so the fantasy land here in the mountains, and then the heroes are going on an adventure. There's some kind of big stone thing. I almost kind of wish that this was actually like a giant titan or something, and not just kind of like a monster or something that's sort of been faded in. But anyway, You liked dungeon crawlers, now play a complete adventure game. Yeah, but no, it's too much. It's way too much. They were talking about like the rules for day and night cycling in the overground exploration bit. Like when you go, oh god, you know, it was what they needed to do probably with that Essen demo was just like hook you on like the core good mechanism. Like the combat, you know, is great. So here's really selling the combat, you know. But even when we were learning the overground combat stuff, and she was explaining stealth and line of sight and all this other stuff, and I was just kind of like, none of this feels particularly good. It just kind of feels like, okay, we need mechanisms for people to resolve stuff with stealth. There was patrol movement and enemy facing, and you can hide corpses in bushes, and it was all just way too much for them to not be like, okay, at its core, like Gloomhaven, right? It's like there's so much going on in Gloomhaven, but summarize it with, here's your deck of cards. The cards have powers. You have to manage this hand of cards, because if you run out of cards, you fatigue in the dungeon. Try to use your powers to get through the whole dungeon. On your turn, you pick a card. Play one card. Like, it's very simple to explain, and everything grows out of that. But it felt like there wasn't like a starting point for this. Like, why didn't we start in the dungeon? We didn't even start in the dungeon. And I feel like they wanted to sort of show you the whole scope of the adventure. So we start on the overground exploration board, and then we did a town encounter, and then we went off on a mission, and then we had to do the overground bit. And by that time, it was 2.5 hours into the teach, and she's like, and now you're in the dungeon, and we're like, great, thank you, but we have another appointment to get to, which we didn't. Anyway, there you go. I wanted to like it, and I'm sort of full of admiration that someone attempted to do this, but I think someone needed to focus these guys a bit at some point. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some people will get this and they'll be super into it. Maybe. Tiger says, I need better restraint with Kickstarters. Yeah, me too. I need to get back to the Kickstarter commentaries. Eddie says, the only Kickstarter I'm planning on backing is the Sleeping Gods sequel. Me too. But also, I'm like tempted by Hamlet. I don't really know much about it, and it looks outrageously expensive it's currently on Kickstarter. It looks outrageously expensive for the Kickstarter version. The retail's apparently going to be way cheaper, so I think probably you should just wait for that. I just like building medieval villages. I don't know why. I think it's, I used to play Majesty when I was a kid, which was a kingdom builder simulator. Fantasy kingdom builder simulator, and I loved it. Now I'm always like, yes, let's play the game where I build a medieval village. Yeah, exactly. After that meme. That's no joke. Chris is somewhat better restrained than I am. Although neither of us are great. I really need to assign a budget. Maybe one Kickstarter a month. Anyway, I've got one more question here for the Q&A. And that is from Eddie. And Eddie said, have you played any games where you find the playability of the digital version a preference to the physical version? Which I found an interesting question, because there's two games that immediately sprung to mind. But generally speaking, I much prefer the board games, just because I like to be in a room with people and sitting around and actually playing. I just find it immensely enjoyable. I derive a huge amount of enjoyment from that. I think if your enjoyment from board games or from gaming comes solely from mechanisms, then I don't see why you would ever go to meet people in person. And a good example, I think, is a good example of the sort of the nuance is Race for the Galaxy on BGA, because Race for the Galaxy is a game that's notoriously hard to sort of read the cards on. There's a lot of sort of iconography and powers that are similar but subtly different. And BGA does a great job, Board Game Arena does a great job of implementing it digitally and giving you rules references when you hover over the cards, and it comes up and explains everything that's going on with the card. You don't need to remember any of the iconography. I'd say it's a great way to learn the game, but the way Race for the Galaxy works is it's a sort of, I take an action and I get a souped up version of that action, and then you all get like a less good version. And to an extent, there's this whole kind of like element of trying to figure out what other actions everyone else at the table is going to take, and it's completely lost in the digital version unless you're playing with webcams and voice chat. And even when you're playing with voice chat, it's lost. You need to see people's faces. You need to see them sort of sitting there and puzzling over their cards, because in the physical game you pick a card to play. In the digital version, everyone just clicks on something on their screen. You don't see them futzing over their cards or running them through their fingers as they desperately try to work out, like, I really want to take the trade action this round, but only if someone else takes the develop action. Is anyone going to develop? Let me look at their boards. Oh, I don't know. Mike just played a development last round, so maybe he's not going to develop again. But if I pick develop and he picks develop, I'm going to feel like I've really wasted it because I really need that trade action. Otherwise, I'm going to have to just do it next round, and that's going to, So that whole element is really lost from the digital implementation. So I think that there are real pros to digital implementation. In particular, the sort of the iconography and the rules can be made a lot simpler and more accessible. On the other hand, there's this sort of element of playing with real people in person that's kind of lost. But I'll tell you, the one that sticks with me is Dominion. So I'm a big fan of Dominion. Difter says Through the Ages. I like Through the Ages in person, Difter. I like to see people's faces when I declare war on them, and their satisfaction when they reveal army cards I didn't know they had. But the Through the Ages digital app implementation is very good. It makes it a lot faster. Not when me and Chris played on BGA, but the Steam version makes it a lot faster to play, and a lot less sort of overhead. The actual game comes with tips. Through the Ages comes with tips on how to manage your action tokens, so you can quite easily rewind your turn, because you're probably going to want to. And you have to sort of allow people to have backsies on their turn, provided no new information has been revealed, or it's not going to compromise anything that's like that. But yeah, Through the Ages is vulnerable to people making rules errors. It's true. And it can go on very, very long, particularly if people are unfamiliar with the game. And it can, also it can be quite brutal if you make mistakes. So it can be a long and brutal game. And the digital. So I think that's another great example of a game where it might be good to learn digitally, and then you can go and play the physical game once you know it better, because then you won't be committing to a 4-hour game that might just become horrible for you. Michael Newsom says, I love the undo buttons on digital games. Yep, it makes backsies much more manageable. I particularly like it when the game has the undo button sort of integrated, so the undo button becomes accessible and inaccessible according to what the designers feel is reasonable to undo and do, or not undo. So that's great. But Dominion is the deck builder, the sort of classic deck builder. I have a lot of the cards for it. I think there's like 2 or 3 expansions I'm missing. I also don't have the second editions of the core sets, but I just feel no need to acquire additional Dominion cards because I have so many. But Dominion is a kind of game where I really enjoy building an engine that just runs itself outrageously, a deck that plays its entire self and does some stupid shit, but it takes forever to play out, and often it's not even game winning. I just enjoyed building it, and then I lose because everyone else bought the victory cards while I was building it. And Dominion is a game that's almost too laborious to play at 3 players in real life. But it's also like a game that I actually enjoy playing at 3. But Dominion.games is the web implementation. It's not the best implementation. There was a better one which they got rid of for some reason. But Dominion.games is, you can get like all of the expansions, like €4 a month or something, and I play it all the time with people online. We play 4 players, we play 3 players, we play 2 players. It's great. I play the digital implementation of Dominion all the time, and since I started playing it, I've never gone back to the original game, the physical game. That's not actually strictly true. I went back to the physical game for the first time in a long time because we got stuck at the games club, and the person who was supposed to be bringing the game we would play had to call in sick, so we didn't have any games to play, and the other guy at my table Um, he lived nearby and ran home to get his games, and he only had Dominion and Welcome to, so we played those. But that's very exceptional circumstances. I'm very unlikely to get the physical copy of Dominion out. If we're sitting down to a physical game, I'll probably get something else out. But I love playing Dominion, and I have great fun playing Dominion dog games all the time. Although, I do buy all the expansions for that, and we just randomize kingdoms. That's kind of our preferred way to play. The core game has pretty much lost all interest to me at this point. It's just too simple. I need the expansions. And my favorite part of it is basically being presented a whole ton of crazy cards. I'm trying to work out, what is the most nonsense I can do with these cards. Chris often just goes for big money and wins when we play. Big money is just buying the sort of the big high value treasure cards and then getting the victory cards as quickly as you can. Because I'm building some shit that plays out like 50 cards in a single turn, or accrues up £1 billion or whatever. By the time I get it round to like I've got this killer turn or multiple killer turns, where I'm like buying victory cards and siphoning them back out of my deck and storing them somewhere for even more points. And there's only like 2 cards left, and then the game just ends and I've lost. I mean, my one real complaint about Dominion, and this is an aside, Eddie, because this isn't really what you asked, but is that it's got no mitigator for turn count. So like the first player can just end the game and have had an extra turn. And we found, like, especially when we play it digitally, because like this is the thing, in the physical version, nobody really tracks who was first player and nobody really notices. But in the digital version, for some reason, they've put in a counter to count how many turns each player had. And then like you see that like more often than not, the winner is the person who had like one extra turn. Like, it's pretty funny. And I actually looked it up to see if it had ever come up in a talk with Donald Vaccarino, the designer. And he was just like, yeah, it's fine. We don't think it's a problem. And I was just like, oh, that sounds awfully like, someone saying, like, we don't think we need to, like, have... I don't understand why there's not just a play one more round. Like, if you've ended the game by buying all the provinces, those are all the most high value victory cards, then, anyone who gets a go after you can only buy the cheaper victory cards, so it's going to be less efficient for them anyway, so they're still being punished by not sort of being the one that ended the game. And yet they're even further punished by just not even letting them have a turn. It's bizarre. But Michael Newsom says, one game, one guy just spammed trading gold for duchies and the like. Yeah, I mean, I think big money's a viable strategy, especially like if you look at the kingdoms and you can't see a sort of a fun combo to pursue. I think that's completely fine. Like, I would never, that's what I like about Dominion. You can do what you want, and just sort of buy some money or do whatever. Like, and the kingdoms are highly variable and things like that. So that's my choice, Eddie. It's an obvious choice for me. It's just, it does all the shuffling for you. You just get your turns way back quicker. Dominion is very compelling as a sort of an engine builder thing. But the downtime in the physical game, while everyone's playing out all their cards and then shuffling their deck and resetting it, managing it, especially like the cards where it's like, okay, now look at the top card or top 2 cards of your deck and put one on the top and one on the bottom. If you're playing out multiples of those, oh my god, like even in the digital version, it can take a long time to parse. So it's just, the most interesting kingdoms are borderline unplayable with the physical copy. So it's a digital implementation that just is perfect for me. Michael says, how do you feel about the witch cards? Some of our group were fans, others not. So I think like the witch card is a card that puts curse cards in your deck, and curse cards are cards that are useless and also negative victory points, so they're pretty punishing. I don't have necessarily a problem with those. There are some of the worst cards we took out when we played the digital version. We vetoed some of them. Like, there's a card called the Torturer, who I think can put curses in your deck or make you discard cards. I actually hate the discard cards more. Like what's the one in the basic set? The Militia. Discard 2 cards. Your opponent, you get a coin and everyone else discards 2 cards or some shit. Those I hate more than the Witch, because I find they make the game even longer. Like, the Witch can elongate the game, and the Witch's severity is directly proportional to your ability to trash. So trash is the colloquialism for taking cards out of your deck. In a kingdom where there's no trash available, curses are way more punishing because they're negative victory points that you can't remove from your deck. So they're clogging up your deck and they're punishing you at the end of the game. Whereas if there's a good trash card or a good system for trashing cards in the game, or even maybe a slightly more complex mechanism for getting cards out of your deck, which exists all over Dominion, then the curses are, the impact of the curses is somewhat lessened. Like, nobody's going to care about Michael. Nobody's going to care about the Witch in a game with Chapel. Chapel is a card that just lets you trash up to 4 cards from your hand. It's my favorite card in the game because I love building hyper efficient nonsense. And it's from the core set as well. But yeah, some people have a very negative reaction. I can totally understand why, because it can really gum up the deck. And like, you're sitting there pleasantly building your own engine, and then someone's like, "Have a curse." But I play Dominion with a friend of mine who's vicious and reliably vicious. He's just like, "Well, this is the best move for me, is to fuck you up, so I'm just going to do that." And I find that quite a relief, really. You know, like, I know that he's not going to be angry at me if I do it to him, and, you know, I'm not angry when he does it to me. And we play with most of the bad cards. The cards we veto are the ones that really slow the game down. Another big one is if the kingdom doesn't have any buys in it. So buys is how many buys you can, how many cards you can buy in a given turn, and some kingdoms just don't have extra buys, which means you can buy 1 card a turn and that's it. Or if they don't have any actions in. These are all the things you learn to identify pretty quickly. Like when you're playing with the random kingdoms from like all the expansions, the first things you look for are there multiple actions, are there multiple buys, and is there a way to trash cards? And then you immediately know what kind of game, roughly what kind of game it's going to be based on the answer to those questions. But yeah, I don't think I'll ever really go back to playing it physically. I mean, maybe one day if we're going out to a cabin in the woods somewhere, you know, as a group in person. We just want a nice sort of like little deck builder to play. It's a nice little deck builder. We've got hours to kill and we're not worried about time, and people want to play it. But yeah, I think the digital implementation of Dominion is great. I mean, I don't think it's great. I actually think they could have done a much better job. There's also a Steam version coming out, which I have on beta, but it's basically the exact same, so I don't really... But, you know, it's perfectly serviceable, the digital implementation, but what the digital stuff does for the game, I think, improves what's already a very compelling game anyway, even though it's way too slow in the physical version. It's the when it gets interesting, like, because you know, like I already, yeah, just repeating myself now. Any more questions before I wrap up the stream, guys? This is the final part of the stream, is just open Q&A. If you've got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to call it a night because I ran out of coffee. That means, and also I've got editing to do. So let's stay in chat, so I don't have to go back to that. I think we put everyone to sleep with our Dominion talk, Michael. I don't think anyone's interested in Dominion. Most anticipated board game. Oh, Haggers, I think I was asked that on the last stream. Out of coffee, end of world. I think the thing is, Haggers, like I play so many new games. I kind of sort of forget what comes in and what goes out, and what I'm sort of I'm trying to think if there's something. I mean, oh, I tell you what I was going to do. I was going to talk about Dead Reckoning real quick. So Dead Reckoning is, and it kind of answers this question too as well, Huggers. I mean, it's not anticipated because I actually have it, but I played it once and I'm really keen to get it back to the table. So if you watched our Edge of Darkness review, bear with me here. And if you forgot what Edge of Darkness is, that's entirely understandable because it's the most forgettable name in the world. But Mystic Vale is some kind of deck builder. It's AEG's seminal card crafting system. But really, this is just a fancy term for John D. Clare's sort of system of using transparent cards, where you sleeve the cards into the sleeve and you sort of build your own cards, essentially. And so he did Mystic Vale, which you may well know. It's sort of a push your luck situation. We played it. It's the first thing we ever filmed and played on this channel. And I don't think we were even doing final thoughts. We had 2 cameras. We filmed it at Leisure Games. It's a horrible production, but it is there if you want to see me play that with Danny and Barry back in the day. Um, but Chris and I played Edge of Darkness. John DeClaire is, as far as I'm aware, designed 4 games with the card crafting system. He also did a superhero game that I've totally forgotten the name of, which I haven't played. I've only played the 2 sort of... I played Mystic Vale, and then I played the Kickstarter Edge of Darkness, which I thought was going to be great. I was super excited for it, and you can watch our final thoughts, but we were somewhat disappointed. And by that point, I was kind of like... I think I quite liked Mystic Vale when I first played it, but I had some issues with it, most of which were how solitaire it was. And he did try to resolve that in Edge of Darkness. It's a completely different game, right? Like, and that's actually Dead Reckoning is the third in this sort of AEG card crafting system triptych. I think that the superhero game was actually done with another company, so I don't think it's called the card crafting system, even though it's still the same system. Which is to say, you've got a card sleeve, and you slot transparent cards in, and they reveal different symbols, and so you're building cards in a deck of cards, right? In Mystic Vale, there's a sort of a push your luck element, because the cards you slot have, like, the more powerful sections have like punishing symbols, and if you get too many of the punishing symbols on your turn, you go bust or whatever. I think something like that. It's been a long time since I played it, but there's very little player interaction. Edge of Darkness introduces a lot more player interaction, but it's a very odd game where you're also not just building the cards, but you're deck building, and you're deck building the same deck, which is then filling up a market row. Do you know, I can't remember the rules super well. I played it twice. We played it on the show, and I played it again at GridCon, and I think I meant to do like a sort of a follow-up about it, but it is like Canvas. I mean, Canvas actually, I think, took the idea from John DeClaire, really. But I've not played Canvas. I would like to. I think I got a copy in their latest Kickstarter. I mean, I definitely did, so I'll probably have a copy of Canvas to check out at some point, because it sounded very appealing and very pleasant, but it's not technically the card crafting system, because it's not a John DeClaire game. But I like the sound of the art stuff and putting together the cards. But Dead Reckoning, I backed because I thought, right, this is the next big Kickstarter from John DeClaire, and he's done 4 games with this card crafting system now, and he's got to get it right by now. You know, this is it. This is the one where he gets it right, and if it's bad, then he's out. He's not a good designer. If he keeps harping on this one gimmick and can't make it work, then, you know, time to give up on him and his games. And honestly, I just like the idea of the gimmick, you know, so I think that I wanted to be with him, even though he kind of had proved twice that Edge of Darkness was real bad, and the production was also not. Anyway, Dead Reckoning is a pirate game. You start with a deck of 12 cards. They represent the crew of your pirate ship, and they're all pretty shitty. And it's kind of like a sort of faux open world game. So you got a bunch of tiles that are all different islands. They start face down. You explore the islands with your ships, and then you can kind of go you can essentially go like full-on merchant, where you sort of interact with the islands by bringing money back and forth from your main harbor to the islands, sort of a pick up and deliver route builder trader type thing going on. And you can sort of really invest in shields, so you can do that as fast as possible. Or you can become like a full-on pirate and just sink people with your mighty cannons and bam, bam, bam. And or you can do something in the middle. Or you can become what's I think they called it settler, where you're building up buildings on the islands. And again, or anything in the middle. And you have just 12 cards in your deck. There is like a very fringe way to maybe take a card out of your deck, but not really. So you're pretty much going to be going through those 12 cards. And the cards are... The cards in the game actually have a card in the sleeve at the start, which you level up. And you level up 1 card every time you have a turn. But then you're also slotting transparent things in front of them to give them different abilities. And on your turn, you can basically take any number of actions, but you need icons to spend to make the actions happen. And the icons are all on the cards. So you got a hand of 5 cards, I think. No, you draw. You've got a hand size of 6. You draw 4 per round, so you might have rounds where you've got 6 in hand or whatever. Um, but you're playing out these cards face up to the table. You're doing actions based on the iconography. You're sailing your ship around. You can also upgrade the ship. Um, but we played this with 3 down. So I saw a lot of people playing this at Airecon, and they generally seemed quite positive. So I was kind of like, okay, cool. Um, so I brought it to the Games Club on Wednesday. We played a 3-player game of it, and I really liked it. I thought that when I read the rules, I thought that the transparent card thing was going to be just a useless gimmick. I thought we could have what we could have is a deck of 12 cards, and they just have the character's name on, and then you instead of transparent cards and all this other nonsense. And there's quite a lot of faff to make the transparent cards work because they're all hidden in boxes, so you can't see what's next on the draw deck. This was a problem that Mystic Vale had, where it was like just kind of don't look at the cards. So now they've got tuck boxes that they hide the cards in, and you slide the cards out when you deal them out to the board. And I thought, wouldn't it be simpler to just have all of the transparent cards replaced by little cardboard tokens, and you've got like a board that's all your crew, and when you get the upgrade, you just slot it onto your board, and then when you you have a deck of 12 cards, and when you play that crew, you just check your board for the symbols, and that's it, right? You don't have anything printed on the cards, and you just sort of have it on your board, and you track all the abilities of your crew face up on the board, and then you can always see what all your crew are doing, and it acts like a reference as well. And I'm still not 100% because like it also says in the rulebook, like at some point you're gonna have like some cards that are dummy thick and other cards that are like, you know, basically, you know, untouched, and you're going to be able to tell where those dummy thick cards are. So you got to get your opponents to cut your deck or give you a number, and then you put that many on the bottom, so you can't conscientiously cheat. And like there's all this sort of faff around using, but so here's the thing, it would be probably simpler and more elegant to have the upgrade board, but there's 2 things. One, it would take up more space on the table, probably. And 2, it is really satisfying building the cards and sliding the upgrades in. There's like a real satisfaction to it. It was very pleasing building them. And I did enjoy it. So I got the game here. I have some concerns about it, which is that it's quite long, which is fine, but I also think that the replayability might not be high enough. It feels kind of like there's sort of 3 or 4 strategies, and there may not be a lot of scope. Like there are these things called encounters, which in the core game are only merchant ships and nothing more interesting. There's a little expansion that came with this called Salty Dogs or something, which is like a little draft you do at the beginning, and it replaces your starting crew member with some crew that have asymmetrical powers, which is neat, but I don't think it massively varies the replayability. What it does have, which I haven't explored, are these 2 Saga expansions. And I had a brief look in them, and it looks like there's not like a huge amount of stuff to just like shuffle into the core set. So they're narrative driven, and they seem to add like sort of like encounters beyond the merchant ships in this. Basically, you either fight them and get rewards for fighting them, or you hire them and get some rewards for hiring them. That's it. Like there's no story or anything. Like the only thing that's uncertain is whether they're lightly armed or heavily armed. So if you fight them, maybe it'll be easy, or maybe it won't. But the combat system's real fun. Like it's a cube tower like he used in Edge of Darkness, except now it's a ship, and when you throw everyone, you get a certain amount of cubes based on how many cannons you have on your boat, and you collect everyone's cubes and you just throw them into a tower, and then they spill out onto a board, and where they spill out is going to determine how much damage people take, and also who wins, and you might get resources and stuff as well. And that's it's basically gambling. The more cubes you have, the better you're likely to do, but it's just silly good fun. It looked like a stupid gimmick, but it was actually a lot of fun. I went full pirate, by the way. I went full pirate. I sunk everyone. That was my whole thing. I basically had no sails. I could move like 1 island a turn, but I had tons of cannons. I was just made of cannons rolling around the ocean. But it looks like these add a lot of encounters, but some of the encounters are just like straight up narrative driven. And this one, like, which is the second one. Oh, I've put these in the wrong order. That's number 2. That's chapter 2. This is chapter 1. Deep Legends is chapter 1. Salt and Thunder is chapter 2. Apparently one of these adds like a kraken somewhere that you can fight. And this one does ask you, like, have you played this one? What have you done with this one? I don't know whether it's... I presume it's still a competitive game. I don't know if it becomes like it's got a campaign log pad, so there's definitely a campaign going on in here somewhere. But I was kind of hoping it would just add like loads more cards to the game for more variability. And I don't know whether or not, like, once you're done, you can like just shuffle all the cards from here into here to make sort of like a slightly longer and more variable version of this game. I don't know. So my main concern here right now is replayability, and it sounds like a lot of the replayability might come from a game that's like significantly different. But I haven't had a chance to explore it yet. There are like a few like little bits in here that you can shove into here to increase variability, but it's just like some ship upgrades and islands. It's not like any new transparent cards or anything. So I don't know if it's going to be enough. But my first play was very positive, and I'm really keen to play it again. So that's my initial impression of Dead Reckoning. But I am a little concerned that the strategies might be a little too transparent, in which case it's going to come down to sort of whoever gets the best advancements for their strategy early on, or if 2 people are pirating, maybe then the person who does merchanting will just win. I don't know. But I really like the way the game length is calculated. It's there's just a bunch of achievements, and the achievements are things like exploring or sinking an enemy ship and things like that. And the game ends when someone's got 4 achievements, which is cool. So I do like when there's player autonomy controlling game end rather than just like a fixed number of rounds or something. It's always more interesting, I think. Yeah, so I'm keen to play again, and the card crafting system was fun. In this, I think this is his best one by a country mile of the 3 that I've played. It's the first one where the card crafting system feels actually like... I mean, it still feels like it's a gimmick, and it could totally have been done differently and more simply, and some of the components actually feel a little cheap, and you do find yourself wondering whether or not they spent all their money on transparent plastic cards, but I'm kind of glad it's there. I did enjoy shuffling the crew and seeing what I'd get, and when I didn't draw my gunners, sort of like pretending like I was still a scary pirate, even though I really wasn't all that scary if I didn't have my gunners in hand. And that's it. That's Dead Reckoning for you. I think if you get a chance to get it to the table or to play it, if someone wants to play it, definitely give it a shot. You probably won't regret it, but just bear in mind that it's the most fun to be a pirate and sink other ships, because throwing cubes into the cube boat tower is great, and you can probably be a really successful merchant if you get sails. Just find a valuable island and just plunder it over and over again. But that would be a pretty dull pick up and deliver game, I think. So just go pirate. Spend the whole game throwing cubes at each other. And that's it for the stream. I hope you've enjoyed this just chatting stream. That was a lot of chit chat, but I thought it'd be fun to do an Airecon debrief while I was here. I probably won't do another one of these for a little while, but if you are a patron and you have any questions, there'll be a post to leave them up on, I think. And I guess don't forget to check out that UKG stream tomorrow if you want to win some games. It looks like there's a lot of stuff on offer, and that's pretty neat. And yeah, we'll probably do a patron meetup at UKG as well. So if you do support the show in that way, then you can come and play King is Dead with Heggers and maybe something else as well, because I don't know why we've just decided we're doing that now, Heggers, without a more democratic approach. Difter, now is the time to say thank you for streaming, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate all of you who choose to support the show. You guys are the reasons why I get to sort of sit around and do a lot of what I want instead of what I have to do. And you are the ones that allow me to say things like, well, Haya probably is not going to be good, because otherwise I might have to be more concerned about my future relationship with Le Bot de Jus in case they decide to hire me for something. So thank you so much for your wonderful support. I really, really appreciate it. And it is my favorite way to support the show. So thank you so much. And have a wonderful evening and a wonderful weekend. I'll see you all very soon. And by the way, I think Townsfolk Tussle will conclude on Monday instead of Tuesday because I think Chris is busy. So Monday night for the final fight. Hope to see you all there. Have a wonderful time, everyone. Bye for now.